Look at me in the eyes right now. Tell me what you did. I can't even say it. Tell me what you did. I'm not going to let you go until you tell me exactly what you did that you're so ashamed of. I can't even say it. And he goes, well, and he tells me what I did. And I go, I could care less what you did. And he goes, oh, and I go, and I'm not even God. And he loves you and he's forgiven you. And I don't care. So why don't you just put this lie away? Knowing and experiencing truth has one effect on humans. It sets them free. If you want to love a person deeply, tell them what you're most afraid of. People say God doesn't speak, and you're wrong. 100% wrong, but I didn't hear him. That's true, but it isn't because he wasn't speaking. It's because you didn't hear. I would be intoxicated, and Jesus would be right next to me going, let me know when you want to stop this because I'm ready. And I would tell him no. He goes, I can't believe you taught from the Quran in front of all these people. He goes, I can't believe you did that. And I said, God did it for you. Jesus would have taught from your book.
People don't realize how many times God has spoken to them, but they didn't recognize that it was God.
The most basic element of our faith is learning how to hear from God. And we never start with that. We start with theology.
Paul, when he's getting on the ship to go to Rome, he has no voice, no influence, nothing. By the end of the trip, he runs the entire ship. How? The redhead says, do you know who it is? And she said, no, but he's really nice. And she goes, ask him his name. And she looks back at the redhead. She goes, it's Jesus.
Everyone wants to get to the high places, but if you want to go high, you first have to go deep.
What's up? We are back. Welcome to the show, Jake.
Thanks for welcoming me back, man.
Last time we had Jamie Winship on, Jake rated him an 85 out of 100. And hopefully his rating goes up after the first episode.
Yeah, I don't know.
So would you like to tell us a new updated rating of how excited you are for today?
Currently I'm at a 110.
Whoa.
Wow.
I'm very excited.
It can only go down. Wow.
Last time we could only go up.
Yeah,
so
Jamie, what did you rate Jake and Taylor?
I didn't. I was so in
well, now's
awe
your
of
chance.
that. Yes.
Now's your chance right here, right now.
We were afraid to ask him for his rating because he's a professional. And we wanted to get under about it. Guys, if you're probably already noticed, we have Jamie's wife, Donna, here with us. Jamie and Donna are co-founders of Identity Exchange. It's an agency providing training and consulting in the transformative power, learning how to read.
Yes, good.
Of living fearlessly in one's true identity. They've worked with leaders in professional sports, business, education, law enforcement, government, nonprofit, and other sectors. You have a really amazing book called Living Fearless. Your book's coming out in the next month or two, right?
Oh, maybe in the next year
or two.
But I write courses.
I'm just going to keep prodding
on
this book.
Yeah.
And if you haven't read Living Fearless, you have to get it. You have to read it. We give copies away all the time. I've read it a few times. And it's a book on how to step into your identity. It has less, I think, to do with getting rid of fear and more to do with living as who you are, which kind of erases fear in the process. So,
well, I'd like to ask them a question just for a little bit of a more story-based bio for a second.
Okay.
How many people, if you had to guess, have come to Jesus, Muslim, any religion, have come to Jesus as a result of the work you guys have been doing?
Wow. Oh my gosh.
If you had to guess.
Wow. This is a first time
no
question.
one has ever asked us that question. Wow, I don't even know.
You know, Jamie often talks about his personal testimony when he was 17.
Mm-hmm.
He grew up in a very strict Christian home on his mother's side, not his father's side so much. But never, it was so rule-based and guilt-provoking that it didn't resonate with him. Right. But when he was in high school, he was very athletic and into sports, not so much because he loved it, but more to release anger. And he had a terrible wrestling accident in a tournament and busted up his knee. And he always wanted to be a police officer. And he wasn't upset about busting up his knee and maybe not being able to play sports again, but because he might not be able to pass a police physical. Right. And he was in the hospital and had to have surgery. And this physical therapist came in every day to work with him. And she's the one that really shared the gospel with him in a new way that wasn't, the urgency of hell message, but it was a true message of love. And he always said that her love overrode his anger. And that was what gave him a sense of what the true gospel is and what he really wanted to be able to do with other people, love people that were unlovable. And so when you ask that question, how many people do you think have come to Jesus? We always say, Jamie went back to try to find her years later and could never find her. But we always say when the great roll call of heaven happens and Jesus calls her name to stand up and says how many people were influenced because of her, that thousands, if not millions of Muslims will stand up and cheer for her because that's was her influence on the world, and she never will know it. She's never known it.
There's got to be millions.
That's my answer to the question.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Yeah. It's beautiful because if it wasn't for her, it always goes back to another person, right? So yeah, we've seen people movements, huge people movements in Muslim cities in thousands. So yeah, I don't know.
But we didn't know they were happening when they were happening. And ourselves were part of them, not so much as starting them, but our own transformation. We were counted in the number of people being transformed, not so much like leading the way.
You don't have like a spreadsheet tracking it.
I'll send it to you later.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you're supposed to do is like,
Numbers, keep counting.
That's right.
Yeah, that's when it fails.
So I was at an event recently where Jamie was speaking. You were there as well, and I was saying this off air, but coming from a Pentecostal church background, we're used to like when the sermon gets emotional, you got to have a keys player because you can't catch the story without some pads or anything. Yeah. And so this is what I grew up in. And me and my wife were sitting in this room. It's a little hotel, and you're sharing some story, and I found myself crying, and I'm like, there's no pads. I don't know why I'm crying. There's like, the ingredients are not here, but it's the story of how real Jesus is and how when Jesus shows up, everything changes in a person's life. When you guys are walking through life together, because she's in that story, we'll tell that story later. I think she probably got you into that mess. In
every story she gets
some regards.
Yes, that's right.
But like, how does a power couple, and I say that not to trigger ego or anything like that, but you guys are a force together. How does this happen? How have you gotten here? How did you meet? What was the start like?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to start that?
Yeah.
Because you started all of it, basically, really. I was minding my own business, honestly.
I grew up in a Jewish home. Both of sets of my grandparents immigrated from Russia early 1900s during the pogroms that were happening there. They were lucky to be able to escape and come to America, and the ones that didn't escape, perished, at the genocide and ethnic cleansing that was happening in Eastern Europe at the time. And if they didn't escape, if they didn't perish in Russia, everything that led up to the Holocaust, they perished then. So the fact that I'm alive, I really consider it a miracle. So grew up under that type of, religion, very legalistic, very tradition-based, not so much a personal relationship with God, but just a lot of rules and traditions, and you've got to carry on the tradition of Judaism so the religion and the culture doesn't die out, but no sense of personal relationship with God that was meaningful. And it just didn't really do it for me. I loved the culture of it and the continuity of it and the sentimentality of it, but in terms of personal meaning and spirituality, it didn't have any for me. So as I grew up and got into high school, and you're asking those big questions, what's my purpose for being here? Why do I exist? What's my identity? I didn't have any of that, and I couldn't find it. And I was especially fearful of death, because in Judaism, it doesn't teach anything about heaven or hell. If you read the Old Testament, like what does it say about heaven? What does it say about hell? Like, you probably can't tell me one verse, right? Because there isn't any. And went to my rabbi. Nobody could ever answer those questions. Went off to college, had all these insecurities, was trying to find myself, trying to find a sense of belonging, and couldn't find it. So ended up kind of with the rough crowd, the bad crowd, if you will. And I had this friend that I was dating, a guy that I was dating, and he came and got me once out of the library. I had like some big paper due the next day that I'd waited till the last minute. I wasn't a great student because I'd rather go out and party than study. And he's like, you got to meet this guy. I met this guy and he just changed my life. You got to go meet him. And so he took me to this guy's dorm room. I'd never met him before, knocked on the door. The guy opened the door, and the guy I was dating turned around and left, introduced us, and just turned around and left. Yes. And I meet this guy, and the guy looks at me and he says, God loves you and has a wonderful plan for your life, but you are sinful and separated from him. Therefore, you cannot know that plan for your life.
Best
and
pickup line ever.
Wow.
Yeah,
and he proceeded to tell me how sinful I was. Well, this kind of language is not used in Judaism. I didn't know what he meant by sin. We don't talk about sin. We talk about Passover and eating matzah and, stuff like this, Hanukkah. And, we just don't use that kind of language. We talk about traditions and lighting candles on Shabbat and, saying the blessing over the wine. We just don't use that kind of language. So I didn't know what he was talking about. Then he gets into how I'm going to go to hell if I don't pray this prayer and accept Jesus as my savior. Well, do you know how offensive this is? Because remember, Jesus is the Christian guy. And think of all the people in Christian history, all the Christians that persecuted Jews. In most recent memory, Hitler was an evangelical Christian. So why would I want to have anything to do with Christianity? And he's telling me if I don't believe in this Christian Jesus, I'm going to go to hell.
And this wasn't Jamie.
So guess what?
This is somebody different.
So guess
Just
what?
for the audience.
Taylor, let me finish my story.
Okay.
So I looked at this guy and who's telling me I'm going to go to hell if I don't pray this prayer. A big life decision, right? Pray this little prayer. And so I looked at him and I said, I'm Jewish. We're the chosen people. You go to hell. And I turned around and walked away.
Yep.
I did marry that guy 5 years later.
Oh, it was Jamie.
Yeah.
Oh
Okay,
my
you tell
gosh.
your side
Never
of the
would have
story.
seen that coming.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
So you tell your side of the story.
It was me and my roommate. So this guy introduces me and he leaves. Yeah.
Biggest mistake of his life.
Yeah, big mistake. And so actually, and after we had this conversation, I actually told my roommate that night, that's the girl I'm going to marry right there. I knew it immediately.
He was drawn to the chutzpah.
Yeah, right. And as soon as she told me I was going to hell, I said, yep, that's her. This is my life partner right here. So then I stopped her. I did say all that to her. I wanted to because I was in Campus Crusade and that's what you do. And I stopped her and I said, hold on. Because I had never met a Jewish person in my life. And so when it never occurred to me that she would be Jewish. And so when she said, I'm Jewish, we're the chosen people, you actually said, you need that Jesus crutch. That's what you said to me.
You Christians need the Jesus
yeah, you need the crutch. And I said, I said, wait a second, wait. And I started thinking I'm going to redo this. And so she hesitated and I invited her back and she came back into our room. It was me and my roommate, who was the best man at our wedding, actually. And I started praying and my prayer was, God, because I just had this deep sense in my heart about this person. This is going to be my partner. And I said to the Lord, do you help me? Do you know how to talk to a Jewish person? Like, it just never occurred to me that anything I'd ever known would be related to Jewish people. That's how ignorant I was. And because I grew up that Abraham was the first Christian, that's how I was raised. And
that is so insulting.
I know, it's hilarious. And so I was like, come on. There's a way to talk to Jewish people. I know there's a way to talk to Jewish people. And then so I thought about, the Messianic Psalms. And I said to her, do you know that the Old Testament, do you know what the Old Testament says about the Messiah? And that's what intrigued her. And then we got into talking about the Messiah being in the Old Testament. And I think the big question that really got her thinking was, I said to her, do you know who Isaiah 53 is talking about? Do you know what person Isaiah 53 is talking about? And you knew Isaiah 53. She grew up in Hebrew school and all that. But depending on how you read it, how you're taught something, it never occurs to you to ask another question about it. It's just the framework you know it in. You'll never ask another question about it. And so when I said it's a person, she had never considered Isaiah 53 being a person. That's why you can't just hand a Bible to a person and they get saved. Like, it's not magic. It's not a magic book. And so she said, what do you mean that's a person? That's Israel. It's Israel. And I said, no, it's a person. And I think that's what triggered you she actually made her go to her rabbi and say, who is this?
Actually, I didn't know who it was because we read, there's a course that you follow in the synagogue when you go every week. You read certain portions every week throughout the year. It's the same every week. And so you just read it and it's just part of what you do. It's a script, but you don't really pay attention to what it means. You just do your duty.
Right.
And so when Jamie shared all this with me, I said, I never thought about what it's about. I just check off the list that we do it. And so later after this meeting, I did go to my rabbi and say, what is this about? And he said, it's about the suffering of Israel. And I said, no, it's a prophecy about Jesus suffering on the cross. And he said, no, it isn't. It's about the suffering of Israel. I said, but if you look up what happens to a person during crucifixion, it's everything that happens to a person doing crucifixion. And this is like 5,000 years before crucifixion was invented. And he didn't have an answer for that. And so that was a big indication to me that he didn't know. And so something was off there.
So what was crazy about this was, and you should keep going, but so then it was like launched into hours that night of this long discussion where she started to truth tell, we call it now. So here's these two, we're both 19. And
we're so young.
and these clashes of identities, her very strong identity, which I'd never encountered before. I was just like, I'm going to present the gospel, you just make an intellectual agreement, and then we'll be done with this transaction and let's get on with dating, which I'm not allowed to do until you sign the contract that we're in the same group, because that's what God cares about. And not these deep traditions of your bloodline and where you were born and your traditions and all that, like that doesn't matter. And so so this is coming together. And, as we look back on it, just what was happening in that dorm room was so powerful and beautiful. And we were just kind of feeling our way through it. And Donna was asking me, but like, why am I Jewish? And why don't we sacrifice anymore? And I'm like, I don't know, but here's a verse I know about that. And just struggling through trying to apply the kingdom to the depth of who she was, rather than just, do you get that if you say this prayer, you don't go to hell? Like, that's all I knew about it. And she was asking at a much deeper level. And so we worked through those insecurities, but tell them what happened when you went back to your dorm.
Okay, wait, before I'm going to pick that question. I'm still in shock that it was him.
Yeah.
So did not see that coming. We've come a long way. Okay, so you leave because you're upset, and then what do you...
She tried to leave. I wouldn't let her.
He said, wait, come back. I'm sorry. He apologized.
Oh.
Yeah.
And he told me to come back in.
And you came back in.
And I came back in.
And then I started over.
So the guy who brought you over, he
left.
I don't know why. He knocked on the door, introduced me, and then he left. I can't remember why he left. And this was like
God.
10 o'clock at night. It was late at night.
Yeah.
Well, when you're in college, that's not that late, but it was 10 o'clock at
The
night.
night is just beginning.
But did you guys go on more dates, or did you just break up and just? hang out
Well,
with
we
Jamie?
haven't gotten there yet. So
okay.
Yeah. So he essentially like intellectually assaults her. She gets offended. She tries to leave.
I said, don't leave. Wait.
Bring her back.
Let me start again.
But not with force.
No.
You don't like lock her in
She
there.
was way more forceful than I was.
You come back in, you have hours, and then you go back to your dorm room.
Oh, I stayed till like 3 a.m.
Yeah.
What happened when you got back to your dorm
Because
room?
what happened was those deep insecurities I was talking about before that caused me to try to find this belonging with all these groups. I never felt like I fit in. I'd experienced growing up some anti-Semitism. I was looking for so I didn't like people knowing I was Jewish.
Yeah, she didn't normally tell people she was Jewish. She just did it because I offended her.
Yeah. And I had these deep insecurities. And so I had to find a way to cope with this pain.
Right.
And so I didn't fit in with the smart people, the athletic people, but the drinkers and the drug people, all you have to do is have a drink or smoke a joint and suddenly they love you and you're in. So that became my crowd, but I didn't know it then, but it was masking this deep pain that I had of who am I? I'm going to die one day and what's going to happen to me. I had all these deep, I went to my rabbi, I went to my Sunday school teachers when I was younger. What happens to you when you die? Oh, you go to the bosom of Abraham. What does that mean to anybody? Oh, here was another one. Your soul lives on in the memory of others. Oh, great. This is why I'm supposed to live some type of prudent, moral life. But what does that mean for me? Like, and for me, you just go into oblivion and it's dark and you're alone. But I knew there was a spirit part of me after your body's gone that would live on. What happens to it? And nobody could answer that question for me. And it was terrifying. Yeah. And so when I met Jamie that night, he was the first person that touched on it, that just gave me this smidgen of hope that there was more. But he did it by talking to me from my book, not from some Christian New Testament. He knew enough about the Old Testament to show me things from what I was familiar with that no rabbi or Hebrew school teacher or parent ever showed me, that gave me this sense of purpose, sense of identity, sense of hope for some type of afterlife future.
And my motivation was not the greatest, but God still used it.
Well, it's just a split test. You tried the first, it didn't work, so you
That's right.
try the second.
So I left there at 3 a.m. after he showed me all these prophecies in the Old Testament that were fulfilled in the New Testament, all these messianic psalms and scriptures. And I was walking back to my dorm room and I was weeping. I mean, I was sobbing. I'm walking, there's nobody on campus. It's 3 a.m. It's dark. And I had this literal vision of myself as an old woman laying on my deathbed. I could still, my gray hair was like up in a bun and I'm laying there on a pillow. And I was weeping because I knew that Jesus was the truth, that he was the Jewish Messiah, and that I couldn't have him because I was Jewish. And I didn't know a single other Jewish person in the history of the world that had embraced him as the Messiah. But I knew in my heart it was true and that I couldn't have him. And it was a huge dilemma for me. I didn't fall down and pray the prayer in his room that night, even though I knew in my heart it was true. And it took me about 2 years of figuring this out. And so that's how ludicrous it is that we are trained in these formulaic methods of say this, and this, and then get them to pray the prayer. That you are making this huge life decision, or you're asking someone to do it, and it's this transaction. Let me just lead you in a prayer, and you commit your life to Jesus. I mean, this is a huge decision for people, and
especially if your identity is deep in another tradition. Mm-hmm. For me, I grew up basically in a Christian world. And so it's just which Christian thing are you going to adhere to? But when your identity is deep in an ancestry that died for your benefit, and then you're going to become a traitor to that, just so to protect yourself. That was, I mean, it took Donna, I think, after we were married, maybe 5 years before she could pray in the name of Jesus. That's how deep the sense of betrayal was to her people, by embracing Jesus. That's how deep in her DNA it is. And of course, this was foreshadowing us being in the Muslim world. This is all the beauty of how God works, is these two 19-year-olds wrestling through this in our little way, and God way down the road saying, here we go. Here we go.
It was really foreshadowing to our future,
Yeah.
but how can you know that?
Yeah.
Then,
Yeah.
like, we're going to end up somewhere where you can't do that formula. That if you do it, you're going to get arrested and put on trial.
People are going to get killed.
Did we tell that story
Yeah,
last time? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, because we went back to that. We went back to that formulaic style. Don't ask me why, but yeah.
Because it's programming.
Yeah, it's programming.
Yeah, and
you
your
always go
default.
back to your training, your default.
You have like a root code that you go to when you feel like you need to figure it out.
That's
Yeah.
right.
So it took you 5 years to pray. I want to put a bow on this story. Like, at
Yeah.
what point did you get, because there's the heart thing where you're like, I'll accept Jesus. And then there's like the I'm okay with other people knowing. It seems to be two different classifications. So how did you wrestle through that?
So it took me, Jamie introduced me to some women who really helped me study the Bible. He was smart enough to get out of it. Back to the boyfriend, what happened to him. So he had prayed the prayer, and he was kind of like the seed that fell on the rocky soil that shot way up and then just died. And I didn't pray the prayer, but I was immediately convicted of the lifestyle we were in. And he was like, oh man, we're forgiven, so let's keep on in this lifestyle. And we quickly parted ways. And then I started meeting with these women and learning the scriptures under them. And for the first time, I started praying to God in a way that wasn't some rote memory Hebrew prayer, which also later, this is how the Muslims pray. So I had way more in common with our Muslim friends than Jamie ever did, because our religious ways are very similar, Judaism and Islam. And I saw experiential answers to prayer and entered into an experiential relationship with God. And more than any Bible verse or understanding, that's what changed me, is a tangible, experiential encounter with God.
Yeah.
That's what changed me. And that's why we started Identity Exchange. Because it's not intellectual information that changes your life.
Yep.
It's experiential encounters with God. Moses at the burning bush, Gideon hearing an angel say, "You are my mighty man of valor," hearing his identity and then leading him to save his people Israel. But that's what really changed me. I didn't understand it all. I didn't understand it, but I knew how it made me feel. I couldn't explain it in my head, but I knew the transformation I felt, and it made me act differently. And that's what transformation is. I didn't want to smoke weed anymore. I didn't want to drink I didn't want to go to fraternity parties anymore. And then Jamie, bless his heart, was super patient, and we didn't start dating till about 2 years later. And then we dated for 3 years. Yeah, go ahead.
She called me. We lived in different cities, and she called me I was praying my guts out for years, centuries. It seemed like, come on, God, come on. And she called me one day from her city and said, I made the decision. I'm in. I'm going to do this. I'm going to follow Christ. On her own. I knew it had to be by herself.
I didn't pray a prayer with somebody.
She was in her Jewish community, and in that community is where she made the decision. So yeah, then when we got back to university, then we started I started more actively pursuing. Of course, then she wasn't interested. She goes, you know what I've realized? I don't need any of this life anymore.
I don't need a guy.
I don't need a boyfriend. I'm like, great.
I don't need a guy to give me security.
Fantastic. Thanks,
Work
Lord.
yourself out of a job.
Yeah. Right. So then I had to wait another year for, that to happen. But anyway, it worked out.
I don't think we've ever had a cooler opening story for any podcast ever. I'm was in shock. That is crazy. Okay. I'm gonna bounce around a little bit if that's okay. Are you comfortable sharing the story about and if you're not, that's totally fine, about the Starbucks girl that she planted in? Because I want to hear this. I think people need to hear this story. Yeah. And I think I want to hear Donna's side of the story as well.
Oh man. Yeah. Yeah, well, I can start how I told it, and you can tell, because I don't even know how you actually met her.
Okay.
Yeah. So we were living in Atlanta at the time, and I working in Atlanta, and I came home from work one day, and there was this girl in our house, this young girl in her 20s, she was, I think, and she was skinny, and she had spiked red hair, dyed red hair, and she had tattoos and piercings. Really a cool looking person, but just not what I expected when I walked in our house. We only have sons, and she's sitting in our kitchen, and I just looked at her and I was like, "Hi," and she's hello, and because we have had people stay at our house before, and I said, "Who are you?" And she said her name, and I said, and she goes, "I met Donna at the Starbucks where I work, and she led me in hearing from God and understanding identity, and I didn't have anywhere to live, so she said I could live with you guys." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So that's how she came into our lives. And you want to say,
you want me to tell the backstory?
How you met her?
Yeah. So this would have been about 10 years after we had ourselves undergone this huge transformation of learning to hear from God and discover our true identities. And that happened in Indonesia, and then we lived in Baghdad, and then Jordan, and then we were living in Atlanta, and still going back and forth to Jordan and Israel, developing a course about this and teaching it overseas, developing a course about how to do this with Muslims, and working with the church in Atlanta. So I was in the Starbucks. We lived in this house, and it had 4 bedrooms, and all our kids, our youngest, had just gone off to college. So we always had people coming and going and living with us in this big house. And, one thing, when I would go anywhere, I would just ask God to highlight people to me. 2 of the questions that absolutely changed our lives are, God, what do you want me to know? And then take a minute to listen for what he wants you to know about anything. And then what do you want me to do? Whatever he tells you, what he wants you to know, then ask the follow-up question, now what do you want me to do? And so I never want a human being just to be an object. And so there's always a reason for meeting people, even a cashier in a grocery store or the cashier at Starbucks. So there was a Starbucks that we used to go to all the time, and I would always see this gal. And so the Lord had highlighted her to me. And so this particular day, God, what do you want me to know? What do you want me to do? So I became sort of friendly with her. And this was maybe the 4th or 5th time I had talked to her, just trying to get to know her a little bit. And so I had asked God to really show me who she was in her true self. Because outwardly, she was a little crazy.
Yeah,
she was a little out there, and it's like you could see that she was trying to project this certain image. But I wanted to know what was underneath that. Who was the real person? And I was just asking God to give me glimpses of that. And, I could see that she was outgoing, that she was relational, that she was really not brave, but courageous. Brave just means like bravado, but courageous comes from the heart. And so I just asked her one day, like, when's your break? And would you sit with me and drink a coffee during your break? And so she told me when her break was, and I stayed and waited, and she sat with me. And I just asked her, I said, one of my daily practices is hearing from God, and I would love to sit with you and just ask God what he wants you to know. And she was so open to it. She was super excited. And so we started doing that, and she got a sense of our identity. It was world changer. And she was super excited. And so we just built this relationship. And then I found out that she was in a really tough living situation and with really difficult people that were taking advantage of her, and she didn't have a lot of money. And so, I live in a 4-bedroom house and there's 2 people, and we lived there for free because this church was paying for us to live there. Like, it's a no-brainer. I didn't really have to pray about it, And so
apparently you didn't.
Yeah.
Or discuss it with anyone, apparently.
Jamie and I sort of have this unwritten code that we don't really have to ask each other.
It is unwritten, undiscussed, unwritten.
For permission to do things.
Never.
I love it.
Yeah.
Usually it's only a little contentious when it involves giving away money from my side.
I know, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So then
as
you
long
go.
as it's free.
So then Jamie comes home and
Here she is.
Oh yeah, then she's sitting there, and Donna's brought. You've brought a few people.
You've brought a few people home, mostly criminals.
Yeah, mostly mine don't work out. Donna's work out. Donna brings people that end up overseas with us. You've done it more than once.
Who else?
To Hebrew University. Yeah, she was fantastic. Anyway,
I love the fact check there, though. That was nice.
Yeah.
Nicely done.
Lululemon.
Who else?
Lululemon cashier.
Yeah.
She was amazing. She still is. All of them are. Anyway, so she's living at her house, and she was really great. She was creative. She was talented, but she would do interesting things. Like one time I was walking down our hallway, and Donna had pictures of our family, down the hallway, and I noticed that she had cut out a picture of herself, her head, and put it in every picture in our hallway.
What?
In all our family pictures. Now we have 3 boys.
So we have all these boys and her little red head
Little head, photobombed.
in every picture.
That is hilarious.
And that was I was like, Donna, I've arrested people that do this kind of thing. Like,
Might be an overstep.
Good thing she was super cute.
She was, yeah. That was getting weird. Anyway, so she's with us, and she's, she pays attention to everything that we say. And she was a sponge. We were working on this project where we had been invited to go to Kosovo in that conflict in Kosovo. And there was a sort of a militant Muslim group because of the Kosovar conflict. So the Kosovar Muslims, and the Serbian, that whole thing had happened. And the Kosovar Liberation Army was a Muslim army. That had all been settled, but there was a sort of a militant group stirring up again. And so the Kosovar government had asked us if we would bring a team to quell that without military force, because they didn't want to use military and start that all up again. So I asked them, what's the age range of the group that's where the militants are kind of stirred up? And they said it was young, 18-year-old range, high school, young college. And I thought, well, if we were going to do that, we need to raise up a high school college team to put inside that group. We can't take a bunch of older people and try and do it. We need to put the same age group in among them so that they can be the influencers. So we started working on that, which made it hard because we needed to find parents that would let us take their high school.
It's like taking the youth group,
We're going to take
into
the
a
youth
war
group.
zone.
Yeah. Not to Nicaragua, or Mexico, but to a war zone with real militants, whatever that word is, angry people, gang people. And I was told that the attempt the year before for the group, that whoever was doing it, that the Muslims had burned down the building they were staying in. So it was pretty hostile. It was a pretty intense interview process trying to find the right kids, the right parents that would let them go, how we were going to guarantee their safety. Isn't that funny? Trying to in the Christian life, we guarantee your safety. Like that doesn't even go together, but that's the kind of Christianity we want.
I think Jesus said that.
Yeah, didn't he? I guarantee if you follow me, you'll be safe.
It's the opposite.
Aslan, what you? Yeah, he's not kind, but he's not safe, or something like that. And so, but we got a group. It was pretty amazing. Anyway, so we're discussing all this and planning it and training these kids. And the girl at our house, she hears me talking about it, and she says, Jamie, I know you're planning this trip, and I would really like to be a part of this. Donna prayed with me, and I know my identity is world changer, and I think I should be a part of this trip. And she had grown up on the street in like New Orleans, I think, right, early in her life, and she was tough. She was super street smart, and I just didn't know her well enough, and so I said, well, I know who we're training, and I know the people, and I just don't know if I don't think this is right for you this time in your life. And she would just not let it. She would not let it go. And everything Donna had said to her, she would say back to me, which drove me crazy. Well, Donna said that if we listen to God, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I know. And I'm really part of your family. See, I'm in those pictures right there. And I'm like, yeah, you're not really part of our family like that. You stuck your head in those pictures.
And you're giving her like the nice answer, but what's really going on in your head in that moment? What are you really thinking? What's your honest
She
thoughts?
would get us all killed. Because that's really what I'm thinking. Because
she didn't have a filter. You know what I mean? She was very uninhibited and didn't have a filter. And the Muslim world is so conservative.
Yeah.
And she was just a wild card.
She has spiked red hair, tattoos all up and down her arms.
She can stand out.
And pierced. She'd be like the worst thing you could put in the middle of a Islamic.
You're trying not to stand out.
Militant group.
Yeah.
In a war zone.
In a war zone. Like, she would be like.
Post-war.
She would just represent everything that you don't want to represent. She just countered everything that you want to look. You want to come in quiet, really subdued, really spiritual. And she wanted to bring her guitar and sing, it's like, it's not like Woodstock. We're not doing that. And so, and I really loved her though. I really loved her, but I just kept saying, we can't do it. And she would just say, I pray, I feel like God wants me to. You told us, Donna says to listen to the voice of God. God's inviting me into this. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I said, you don't have a passport, do you? I'm getting a passport. I don't know if she'd been convicted of felonies. I just had no idea about her, but she got a passport. And I got a passport. And I'm like, great. But eventually I just decided I had to let her go. I mean, she was just too sweet, and Donna was zero support on my side. And
she's like feeding the opposition.
Yeah, Donna's like, I'm like, Donna, one thing Donna says to me, it's like, Donna always pulls me aside and we got to be on the same page. And I'm like, what page is your page? Because I'm on my page. What page are you on? Like, you mean get on your page is what you mean, not like the same page, your page. You and her page. That's the page you want me to be on.
That's right, buddy.
I know. And so I lost. And so I said, okay, you can go, but you have to stay right with me the whole time. I promise I'll stay right with you. And Donna's like, I think this is the right decision. I said,
why didn't I go? I don't know why I didn't go.
That's what I said. Like, yeah, you think this is the right decision, and
no,
you're not
I'm really
going.
trying to remember why didn't I go on that trip.
It's even worse.
I know. It's like, you guys are gonna have a blessed time. It's like Georgia Christians. You're gonna have a blessed time.
I can't remember why I didn't go.
Yeah, I think you were afraid because she was going. I think that's why. No.
We'll keep going to the story, but I just want to say real fast that seeing you guys together gives me so much hope for my future, and we are going to be amazing.
You are.
And
You're already
amazing.
I'm so grateful.
I promise.
Oh, this is so.
Let me tell you all the things we've agreed on in our life. Nothing. Our thing.
We could not be more opposite.
No, and our answer to God is yo. That's how fast I say yes and she says no. That's how it's just one word, yo. Yeah. And then we have to work it out from there because our whole decision-making process, okay, you said no and I said yes. Is there anything more we can say beyond that? Then let's just kind of go forward with a no and a yes and see if they can't come together. And they do.
Yeah.
And the no protects us from killing ourselves. And the yes
Because Jamie never thinks about where are they going to go to school?
Yeah.
How are we going to pay for it? What are we going to tell the Jewish parents when we move to Baghdad? He doesn't think about those things.
Donna always says, if I hadn't married you, I'd be a rich doctor's wife on Prozac and bored out of my mind. And I would be dead. So that's how our relationship works. I keep her off Prozac and she keeps me alive.
Jamie alive.
Yeah, so that's how we work.
So good.
Yeah.
So she wins.
So she goes. Yeah. So the women they win, and so we go.
Yes.
So we have the group.
That was a big yes.
We have the group together, and so my strategy is, because I'm trained in covert strategy, is okay. I'm not going to win this battle, but I can win in the end. And so I get this little 14-year-old girl who's just the sweetest, most innocent, pure thing. And I say to her, this is her first trip, and she does exactly what I say. And I say to her, hey, listen, I need to see the girl with the red hair and the tattoos. Your job is to stay with her every second of this trip. And it's like a special mission. And your job is to report to me everything that she says and does. Don't you ever leave her side. Okay. You tell me, report back to me. That's your job. She needs mentoring. You disciple her. You're with me. You tell me everything she does. And then I tell the girl, the redhead, can you keep an eye on her? Because she's young. She's not as street smart as you. So like I glue them together. Oh. So I have this little reporting spy with it. And I'm like, okay, it's because she won't disobey me, the younger one. And so I put them together. It was hilarious. So, and then on the flight over, I make the redhead sit right next to me, just so I can keep my eye on her. So we're flying over there, and she says to me, the redhead, she says, hey, Jamie, I've been praying about this. And, I've grown up on the streets, and I think I understand this stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And she said, I have a strategy of what we should do when we get there. And I said, no, you don't. You do not have a strategy. Your job is not to have a strategy. Your job is to go and learn, and staying next to me and protecting the 14-year-old. That's your job. That's your job. You don't have to have a strategy. And he says, yeah, but I have a strategy. Can I just tell you my strategy? Okay, what's your strategy? It's what Donna did to me in Starbucks. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Donna, who's at home. And wait, let me just say another thing about Donna.
Come on.
Wait, no, it's funny. One time, and Donna has gone with me everywhere we've ever gone except this. This one trip. But so we did this work in the Sahara Desert in the worst place we've ever been. The
Terrible.
Absolute worst job we've ever done.
The UN rates it the worst refugee camp in the world.
Yeah, the Muslims are so difficult there, and it's horrible. And so one time I went without Donna. And so we flew together to Paris.
But twice we've been together.
Yeah, we have been together. But so one time I went without her because we had to do something and she couldn't come. And so me and the guys that went were down in the camp, and Donna went to Paris. She flew with us to Paris, and then she stayed in Paris with
a friend.
So we're down in the middle of the Sahara, and we're out in this place. We're trying to eat this camel meat that the hair is still on the camel. Like and we're all like so nauseous.
Don't forget the sand.
And Donna sends me a picture of what they're eating in Paris.
Oh no.
Right.
It was so good.
She goes, we're having such a great time. Anyway, that's our relationship. She said, just so you feel better. So anyway, so we're
beef bourguignon.
I know.
Can I ask one thing that I'm not sure you already answered it? Was there a specific reason? Maybe you already answered this, but is there a specific reason you brought like 14, 15-year-olds on these types of trips?
Because
it was a youth trip, because it was youth that was causing all the trouble. Because that's
that's
who's recruited into these terrorist
recruit
groups.
These young people. So what we wanted to do is take away their capacity to recruit the young people.
Oh, so that's why you brought the younger kids. Got it.
So if a foreign agent comes in to recruit young people, and the young people say we don't want to be recruited, that's the end of the movement. Wow. You can't stop the recruiters. You'll never stop them. But if there's no one to recruit, the thing ends.
Yeah.
To start an influence among young people.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're on the plane. She's about to share a strategy.
So she's going to share her strategy. Her strategy is, she said, I'm going to do what Donna did to me. I'm going to walk up and down the street in the city, the Muslim city, and just ask Muslims if they've ever heard God speak. And if they say no, then I'm just going to say, do you want to hear him speak right now? And then I'll just pray with them. And when they hear God speak, that they'll be transformed. That's what I'm going to do. And I said, no, you're not going to do that, because you'll get us all killed because they're not going to respond to that. But Donna did it and I responded to, I know, but that's Starbucks in Georgia. This is a different country and it's not going to work in that situation. And your job is to watch her, and I don't want her out doing that stuff. And so you're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. It'll never work that way. And she just says, okay. So we get there, we land, we get there in the, afternoon. And I tell everyone, look, you're jet lagged, just chill out, go to bed. We'll reassemble in the morning at breakfast, and then we'll start. And, we'll talk about what we're going to do, how we're going to work this. So I had told them, when we were training them, like when we start working with the students, they're going to invite you to their house and go. When they invite you, you go. And when you go to their house, they're going to ask you to spend the night. And when they ask you to spend the night, you spend the night with them but we're going to work up to that. We're going to work up to that. But once they invite you into the family, get in the family, because that's a great honor. And we want to be inside those families. So when they invite you in, stay with them, person of peace, stay with them. So that I had told them all that. So we land, go get to the place where we're going to stay in this hotel. And I just, that's it. I don't, they all check in. I make sure everyone's in their rooms. I go to bed. So when I go to bed, the redhead says to the 14-year-old, let's go out and walk around, see if we can meet anybody. And the 14-year-old, she says, okay. So they go out and walk up and down the street. So they're walking up and down the street, and they go into this bookstore where the redhead thinks maybe there's someone here that speaks English. So she goes into this bookstore. She goes up to this covered Muslim young woman, who's the cashier, and says, do you speak English? The woman says, I do. And the redhead says, have you ever heard God speak to you? And the Muslim, just staring at her like, who are you? And this blonde 14-year-old who has this gorgeous Georgia accent that just smiles, and this redhead with all these tattoos and these piercings just standing there. Have you ever heard God speak to you? And no. Do you want to hear him speak to you right now? And she says, would you come to my house? And the redhead's like, oh my gosh, it's working. It's just like Jamie said. Yes, we'll go to the house. And the 14-year-old's like, yeah. And the 14-year-old's like, well, and the little redhead says, this is what Jamie said. If they invite you, remember what Jamie said? If they invite you to the house, you should go to the house. And the 14-year-old's like, well, yeah, that's right. Off they go to this girl takes them to their house. They go to the house. They walk into the house. It's her grandfather and their family. So you can imagine this Muslim grandfather. He looks up, and here comes his covered granddaughter who's in her 20s, and this redhead with spiked red hair and all these tattoos, and this little 14-year-old. And she comes in, the Muslim daughter, and says, these girls walked into my bookstore and asked if we wanted to hear if we'd ever heard God's Allah speak to us, and if we didn't, did we want to hear him speak? And the grandfather's like, really? And do they want to stay for dinner? And so, yeah. So the Muslims are very hospitable like this. And so they stay for dinner. And then he says, do you guys want to spend the night? And the 14-year-old's like, well, and the redhead says, this is exactly what Jamie said would happen. We're doing exactly what he said. We should spend the night. Isn't that what he said? And she's like, well, that is what he said. Okay, well, and she knows, well, I'm supposed to stay with you. So she's all like, okay. So they decide to spend the night. So they get up into the room, and it's the Muslim girl and her cousin now. There's two.
And you have no idea.
No, I'm asleep.
You think
He's
they're at the
asleep
hotel.
at the hotel.
I think they're all in their room.
And at this point, the Muslim family, they think they're talking to Allah, God, not Yahweh, God.
That's in the language they're speaking. The Christians and the Arab Muslims say the same word for God.
Right.
There's no
different.
Right.
Just like an Arab Christian would say Allah, and a Muslim Christian would say.
You have to think of it like before there was Islam.
They use the word Allah.
Just the Arabic word for God is Allah. It's the same.
Doesn't have anything to do with Islam. Yeah, it's from the.
It's like Dios in Spanish means God. It's just
it's
the
from
word for
Elohim.
God.
It's Elohim. In Aramaic, it's Allah, and in Arabic, it's Allah. It doesn't have it does not like from this group or this group. It's just the derivative of the word.
Got it.
So, so they're in the room. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. And so the girl said, so the redhead says, do you want to hear God speak to you right now? And the two cousins are like, yeah. So she, and the 14-year-old is there. And the 14-year-old is actually quite good at this. I didn't share this thing, but she's actually quite good at this. The 14-year-old, well, that's
another
later.
story.
Yeah. So the redhead says, praise. And she says, God, these girls have probably never heard your voice. And so out of your kindness, this is how we teach it, not because we are righteous, but because you are merciful, O Lord, Daniel chapter 9, will you speak to them? Will you reveal yourself to them in whatever way you want to? And then you don't say anything else, and you just wait in silence. And I always ask people, like, why won't we do this with people? Why won't we just ask them, God, would you just speak to this person, and just sit there in silence? Why wouldn't we do that? Why do we feel like we have to explain everything to people? Because we're afraid that God doesn't speak to people. Mm-hmm. That's why. Mm-hmm. So we don't give God a chance to talk. So anyway, so she stands there and she waits, and the cousins say, we don't hear anything. Nothing. And so the redhead's like, okay, that's okay. And so she goes to lay down in bed. She's exhausted. The 14-year-old lays down in bed. The two girls, they all go to bed. Which is what I love about her.
Can I just interject? Yeah. Like, why didn't that bother her?
Yeah, that's what I love.
That God didn't show up.
I know. Yeah.
You know? Do you know why? Because God doesn't just capriciously show up sometimes. He's with us all the time. And we don't know his timing of why he does things when he does or when he doesn't. But the thing about the redhead, she knew that from her own experience of me praying with her. Sometimes she didn't get this immediate answer. Sometimes it came the next day when she was taking a walk, or sometimes it came at night when she was having a dream. It doesn't always come the way we expect it to come, and she knew that.
And she didn't allow disappointment to block everything.
She doesn't get her identity from what happens.
Right. She knew her idea of success was not the right idea.
Right.
And so it didn't faze her that it didn't happen right away.
She knew that God would speak when was the right time for God to speak.
Because
so it doesn't faze her.
So she had the experience to back up the question.
That's courage.
Yeah.
It's like, God, I'm here to say he'll speak to you. And then when he does, let me know. And I'm going to bed now. Is it right now? No. Okay, I'm going to bed. I love that. I love how she does that. That's what was so great about her. And so she goes to bed, and then she's asleep, and she wakes up, in the night, and one of the Muslim girls is standing up in the middle of the room.
The redhead wakes up in the
redhead and sees the Muslim girl standing up, and she's talking in the room. She's having a conversation with someone. She's whispering. And so the redhead is watching her talking, and she says, "Are you okay? Are you okay? What are you doing?" And the Muslim girl looks at her and says, "Yeah, I'm okay. I'm just talking to this guy." And the redhead says, "Do you know who it is?" And she said, "No, but he's really nice." And then she knows, the redhead knows. And she goes, "Ask him his name." And she says, "What's your name?" And then she looks back at the redhead. She goes, "It's Jesus." And then the redhead goes, "Okay, have fun," and goes back to sleep. She wakes up the next morning, and it's her and the 14-year-old. She wakes the 14-year-old. They go downstairs, and the whole family's assembled downstairs, all excited, because the cousin came downstairs and told the whole family that Jesus had come to their room that night and spoken to her because of the redhead and the 14-year-old being there. And now the whole family wanted to hear Jesus speak to the whole family. And so they just prayed over the whole family like that. So that's going on. So that was the beginning of the whole movement in that city, was that family right there with the grandfather. So I wake up in the hotel and I go down to breakfast in the dining hall, and I'm looking around, I'm counting, and I'm like, oh no, where is the redhead? Oh no. And I'm like, start to panic. And I'm like, she's not here, and the 14-year-old's not here. Oh my gosh, where are they? And they come walking in, and the 14-year-old comes up to me, and I'm like, where were you? And the 14-year-old says to the name of the redhead, she goes, Jesus came into the room last night, in the room where we were staying, and Jesus talked to the girl there, and nobody woke me up. Nobody woke me up to tell me that Jesus came into the room. I slept. He sat on my bed, and nobody woke me up. And she's really upset about it. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Where were you? And then I look at the redhead. I'm like, what did you do? Where were you? And she tells me the whole story of what happened. And then how the whole family, like this whole family has been transformed by that. And the whole story of the whole thing. And then I verify it with the 14-year-old. And so when I go to talk, and I realize that what she has done is exactly the right thing to do for this city. And so when I stand up in front of our whole team of young people, I said, I've thought about this, and I have a new strategy of what we're going to do in the city today. We're going to walk up and down the street in the city.
Oh my gosh.
And we're going to talk to young Muslims, and we're going to say, have you ever heard God speak to you, especially to the students? And when they say they haven't, we're going to pray with them. And that's what we did for 10 days with students. And it was so powerful what happened among those kids. And then we got invited into the families. I went to meet the grandfather of the first family. It was so powerful what happened in that city that at the end of the 10 days, when we went to get on the bus to go back to the airport, the Muslim fathers and grandfathers were out at the bus stop crying because we were leaving that town. The mayor of that city came to faith, and he started a sister relationship with the city in Georgia, the town in Georgia where the kids came from. They have it to this day. And they started a student exchange program with that town, which exists till this day. And that's where the big movement in Kosovo started, was in that city, because of that redhead and that 14-year-old. That's where it started.
Wow.
So when you say, how many Muslims have you seen come to faith? It's like that. Yeah.
It's the multiplication of it through one person who's radically on fire.
But what's so cool is, like, if you go back to our story, that prophetic nature, fast forward, 30 years, our story happened in the early 80s, maybe 1980, 79.
Right.
And it's that experiential encounter, not the formulaic prayer.
Right.
It's the experiential encounter that changes somebody's life.
So
Like,
good.
you can't go in and intellectually explain a religious concept and force somebody to pray a prayer, a transactional prayer. That doesn't do it. In fact, the people that went in, did you say this? To the same city before, another group, they burned the building down. Yeah. They chased the people out and burned the building down. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Anyway.
All right, time, because he's got to roll. Sure. Yeah, we can take a bathroom break. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
I'll go to the bathroom if you're going to the bathroom.
You go for it.
I don't know.
We were at University of Kansas, and I don't know if I told you this, and I got invited to do a thing for some campus ministry. It was like 500 students. And I went in there, and I was just doing a pretty Christian thing on identity. And at the break, I did this exercise where let's give your false identities to Jesus. And we did half of it where you gave your false identities to picture Jesus. And then I stopped, like, okay, when we come back, we're going to talk about how to receive your true identity. And this Muslim guy comes up to me at the break, and he's holding his false identities in his hand.
Wow.
Because they're not allowed to visualize a prophet. What? And he's really upset. And he goes, I know my false identities. I can't give them away. And he's really upset. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a Muslim in here? Who brought a Muslim? But these guys had brought their Muslim roommate. And so I was like, oh no. And so he was so troubled. And I'm like, he said, I'm a Muslim. How can I get rid of these? I can't visualize a prophet. And I'm like, actually you can, but it would take me time to explain it to you how you can. And I thought, okay, I said, let me just think about it for a second, but let me think about it, and I'm not going to let you go. Don't worry. So I'm sitting there and I'm saying, Lord, what do I do? How do I do this? Because I was brought here to talk to 500 Christians, and there's one Muslim, and to talk to him, I'd have to ignore the 500 Christians and just talk to him. What do you want me to do? And I was really troubled by it. I was really sad for him. And so they started singing the song to open up the next session, which was how to receive your true identity. And they're singing that song about leave the 99. Oh. And I'm asking the Lord, what do you want to do? And they keep singing that phrase. And I'm like, please, Lord, just give me a clear. And he's like, leave the 99. And I'm like, are you telling me to disregard every person in here and just speak in the whole next section to that one Muslim? And the Lord's like, yes. But I would have to use the Quran the whole next session in front of all these Christians. Yes, I would do that. So I was like, all right. So I went up there and I said, how many of you love that song? Well, we all love that song. I mean, how do you think Jesus would leave the 99 to find one person? Yeah, I said, good. Because that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm like, you're not going to get this, but I'm going to do it. There's some people in here that can't go forward unless I use the Quran right now. So I'm just going to ask you to bear with me. You'll see what I'm going to do, but I don't have time to explain it. So for those of you that understand the Quran, I just want you to look at this one. And I showed from the Quran why you can give your false identities to Jesus from the Quran.
Oh my God.
And I did the whole session from the Quran. But what was wild was before we started the whole thing, I met with the international student leaders and I was saying, how many Muslims are coming to your international outreach? None. I said, okay, remind me sometime today, I'll get with you and tell you how to get them to come. That whole session was a training for those guys on how to do it.
So it lined up.
So I did it. I did the whole thing. And then all of us together then asked Jesus to give us our true identities. And when we were doing the quiet exercise after I finished the Quran, I said, okay, now all of us can see Jesus now. This is why the Muslims have permission. You can see Jesus. The Quran gives you permission. It's in line with the Bible, blah, blah, blah. Okay, here we go. So we started doing it. What is the name that Jesus calls you? And the one Muslim guy stands up in the middle of the room, screams out, I can hear him. I can hear him. He's yelling. And the guys that brought him start crying. He goes, I can hear him. He calls me. I forget what he said. And he's screaming it out and everyone starts clapping. That guy, he was on a scholarship for soccer. After he came up to me after it was over, he goes, I can't believe you taught from the Quran in front of all these people. He goes, I can't believe you did that. And I said, God did it for you. This is just like Donna. Like he knows your book. Jesus would have taught from your book. Paul would have spoken from poems of Zeus. Jesus quotes the Samaritan text because he wants you to know. He goes, I'm losing my scholarship for some technicality. He said, I don't know what to do. I said, okay, in the next session, we're going to ask God to give us wisdom in a problem in our life. Ask him. He comes up to me after that session. He gave me 3 ways to deal with my scholarship. He gets the scholarship worked out. I leave. He calls me the next month and he goes, I just did a thing where I invited all the Muslims to my dorm room and did an exercise on why we can, as Muslims can see Jesus from the Quran. And so now he lives in New York.
Who are you talking about?
The guy in Kansas that came to faith, the one Muslim guy.
Oh, yeah.
And he's an investment guy, and he leads this Islamic outreach in Buffalo. Isn't that wild?
How crazy, man.
Well, I want to do what you guys are doing, man. It's so amazing.
That's so crazy. So to take us to the end of that story, something I was really curious about was from your perspective as a leader, Jamie, was there anything that you changed after that? Seeing somebody go against all orders and then it worked.
Yeah.
Like, was there anything from a principle perspective? There's obviously there's childlike faith. There's this purity of heart. As a leader, did you make any big adjustments or anything that you had to note for later?
Yeah, I stopped just dismissing people because they didn't know enough. Just assuming they didn't know anything, that I knew more than they did because I have more experience. And so really, especially if they're younger, but once a person understands their identity, then asking them, and we do this, this is pretty much necessary in everything we do, is just ask. We'll present a challenge or a problem or something we're going to go work on, and just ask each person, in your identity, as we pray through this situation or visualize this situation, tell me what you see, tell me what you sense, tell me what you think. Just to hear it, especially in community with the other ideas, it's really beautiful. Even if their idea is rudimentary, it's still, they add something valuable. Even and sometimes with young people, it's a kind of boldness that we get very cautious and risk averse, and they have a kind of boldness that we lose. So it's good to have them push us. When we lived in the Middle East, we had a bunch of 20 somethings with us, and we would train them in everything that we knew and how we worked with Muslims. And then we would send them out in the city, and they would go do what we said. And then they would come back and tell us what they would do differently. And mostly what they would say is, we would do this quicker. We would get to this faster. This slowed us down.
It was kind of that idea, let our ceiling be your floor.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that kept us really moving, kept us from getting fossilized in ideas.
We learned early on when we first went overseas that we were very egotistical. We thought we knew everything. We were well trained, and we really crashed and burned. I think the epitome of, or the pinnacle of that, was Jamie getting arrested, and then we went into this really 3-year dark period. And as we kind of climbed out of that, you know, when you have a big failure, it teaches you a lot of humility. And so even if a person is much younger than us with way less experience, they still have something very valuable that they bring to the table, especially when you're considering identity rather than maybe education as a factor in what they are contributing to whatever cause or whatever business or whatever enterprise you know you're going after. And so that failure really changes your perspective on who's with you and what they're contributing. And Jamie is especially, I mean, you're really humble in that area, and you give everybody an equal seat at the table.
He's like Moses, humblest man who ever lived. Put that under your title. Can we follow that thread for a second? Because the story was shared in the last episode of when you were being arrested, and I will never forget you mentioning that you were on the phone with one of your sons, and you were like, you know how we came over here to like preach the gospel and help people. Daddy's going to do that in a different way. And,
it was in person, like holding his little shoulders, holding his little face and
even
his hands.
crazier.
Yeah, we were all together.
So I get the picture of just like, you guys, I want to talk about faith for a second, because you've been through situations that require an extraordinary amount of faith. And it seems on the outside that when he was going through that, you were just champion holding the fort down at home. But I want to talk about it because there have probably been experiences where you have faith, but it's crazy and you don't know, like, how do you know if God's going to work through? Like, how do you keep your faith strong when it looks on the surface like this is not going to work out?
That's a really good question, because like you're saying, you don't know if it's going to work out. And when you're in it, you don't know that you have the faith. You're not like, oh, I have so much faith, everything. You don't know that you have the faith. And I think the secret is just staying really present, because when you project into the future, when you imagine the future, and it's a future of fear, you're going to be full of anxiety. So imagination plus fear equals anxiety. Now, I was maybe 33 when that happened, and it was our first time overseas. We'd been overseas maybe 3 or 4 years. So what I'm saying now, of course, is beautiful hindsight.
Yeah.
And we thought you don't think it's going to work out. It's not like we think this is going to work out.
I mean, I thought he was going to prison.
Yeah, it was like, how are we going to survive 10 years of prison?
And so we had a small team, and the day of the trial, our whole team was at our house. And now, 30 years later, actually, if I was 33, giving away my age here, 32 years later, what the most vivid memory for me of that day, we had marble floors in our house, which everybody had because they're cool. We live 3 degrees south of the equator, hot all the time. Everybody has marble floors. And my most vivid memory is laying face down on the floor, just begging God to intervene. That's my most vivid memory. And our whole team, there were seven of us on the team. And I think one of the other guys had gone with you. I don't think he was in the trial, but I think he went with you over there. So there were 5 of us, and the kids are just playing. The kids don't really quite know. They were little going on. And I just remember all of us were on our face. I mean, literally face on the floor, face down, just begging God to intervene, and not really preparing for the worst, because the worst was unimaginable. Because they had confiscated our passport. Jamie got arrested. They confiscated our passports. So there was no way off the island. The island was 50 miles by 60 miles, 2.5 million people. Still very, we lived in a house. We had running water, but this is way before the internet. So very isolated in that sense. But the ways of the people, like if there was a theft in the market, I'll never forget we had a student living with us, and one day she came home. She said, "Are you going to the town square? Are you going to the public square?" We're like, "No, why?" "They caught a thief in the market and they're going to pull out his fingernails in the town square. Don't you want to go and watch?" And do you remember that?
Or they just killed them. Yeah.
And we're like, "No, we don't want to go and watch." And she couldn't believe we didn't want to go. So this public type of shaming and punishment was just the way of the culture. Mm-hmm. And so here we are facing this prison sentence, no way off the island, no help from Jamie had called the embassy, no help from the embassy. And we just don't have a plan. Plus, I'm Jewish. That was a huge secret because of the Muslim factor. We couldn't let anybody know I was Jewish. And the future was unimaginable, and just couldn't go there, or just total nervous breakdown. And my most vivid memory, like I said, was just laying on the floor with our team. And I just remember the feeling of the cold floor on my face and my body, just begging God. And then when Jamie walked back in smiling and told the story of how that man came in and literally intervened and saved his life, like, it makes me emotional now. Like, God literally intervened in a way that we couldn't have ever predicted. So did I have faith? I don't know. Like, at the time, I can't say, I'm full of faith that God's going to do something, but I just did. The only thing I knew to do was fall on my face and just total humility, right, and just staying in the present moment. Like, I just couldn't imagine a future of Jamie in prison for 10 years and me not being able to leave. And I guess our oldest son at the time was about 8. Like, being there till he was 18 without Jamie, or Jamie in a third world prison, like, you just can't, your mind can't go there. And so, it's a beautiful question, Taylor. Like, oh, Donna, your faith. I can't say I had faith, but I did. The only thing I knew to do was fall on my face before God and beg for mercy.
I have one more question for you, and I want to talk to you about it, because you said something that I don't even know if you know sometimes that what you say is super profound. I
tell him every day. I'm like, do you know people listen to what you say? You got to pay attention to what you say.
Yeah, because he'll say these things. You do it in sermons and stuff too, and I'll have to pause it because you just skip over it. It's just like, well, you just said it now. You're like, you just do the next best thing. Mm-hmm. It's like, wait a minute. That's you're proceduralizing it into like how we do the next thing. I want to talk to you about your process.
That's one of our mottos, actually. Okay. Just do the next thing.
Here's my question for you. That was 32 years ago. Does it get easier?
It gets easier. It doesn't. It gets easier in the sense that you have, if you think of it like a bank account, you have this credit of experience. And you can draw from that credit of experience. Like I said before, knowing that God doesn't capriciously show up sometimes. God is with us all the time. And your expectation of what the outcome is what changes. That's what changes. Your idea of success is what changes. You don't have this expectation of your idea of success. Here's your expectation: Jesus.
Yes.
Expect the Lord. That's it. Expect Jesus.
Like what David was saying when I was young and now I'm old. And so his credit has grown through his life of I've never seen the righteous forsaken. But
Exactly.
when we're early, it's harder because we don't feel like we have as much of that.
Right.
So we're borrowing from sometimes
Right.
other people who have it. And you guys are those people, I think millions of people are probably borrowing from, like, well, God showed up for Jamie and Donna. So I think he could probably show up for me.
And, Taylor, this is really the definition of sharing your faith, because we think sharing your faith means leading somebody to pray a prayer. But what I'm doing right now is sharing my faith with you. God helped me in that situation. God was there for me in that situation. Why wouldn't he be there for you? Why wouldn't he be there for you? If he, one of my absolute favorite verses is Isaiah 43. And Isaiah 43:1, it's when Jacob is receiving his identity. It's Isaiah talking about, where is it in Genesis? Genesis 12? Where Jacob wrestles with the angel.
Beyond 28, later in Genesis.
Genesis 28, maybe.
Yeah.
And then Isaiah is talking about it. And it says in 43:1, see, I have formed you, O Jacob. I have called you Israel. That's the name change, the identity change. And then I love this because he says, do not fear. You've gotten your true identity. Do not fear. I have redeemed you and called you by your name, not the collective name, child of God. That's beautiful. But it's not like child 1, child 2, child 3, right? This is your unique name. I have called you by your name. Why? So you will know that you are mine. There's that belonging piece,
Yes.
not so you'll know your purpose, your vocation. So you will know that you are mine. Then the very next two verses say, when you go through the fire, not if, when.
Right.
It doesn't say, I will pluck you out, I will rescue you. It says, I will be with you. There's that belonging piece. When you go through the flood, it will not overtake you. Why? For I will be with you. And this is that credit of experience that we have through all these years of going through difficult times, is expect the Lord. Expect the Lord. My idea of success is not God's idea of success. In the early years, it's like, why didn't God do this? I prayed so hard for this to happen. Why didn't he do this or that? Because he knows what's good for me, and I don't know. This is Matthew chapter 6, right before the Lord's Prayer. Don't be like the Pharisees showing off, blah, blah, blah. Your Father in heaven knows what you need before you do. So pray like this, our Father who art in heaven. Your Father in heaven knows what you need. So this has become our prayer. God, what do you want me to know about this situation? I don't know what to pray. Here's what I wish would happen. Not because I'm righteous, but because you are merciful, like Jamie said before. This is what I would like to see happen, but your will be done, not mine. Your will be done, not mine. Just show me what can I do in the next minute so your will is done? Because that's what's going to be best for me. You know what I need. What do I need? What do you want me to know? And that's what it's become for us. And then you're never disappointed. Like, you're never disappointed.
You're shocked.
Yeah. Why are we disappointed? Because we pray things out of our own will, our own emotional longings, without saying, God, what do you want me to pray for? You know the best thing in this situation. You search me and know me, and you show me what to pray for. Literally, that's what's changed our lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you guys, I have my question for you still queued up. We're still going there, but how do you guys pray together in those moments? Because you're talking about my disappointment is I'm praying for something God never asked me to pray about. I'm assuming that you guys have never prayed for something that God didn't tell you to pray for. That's for us. That's for the immature.
We
never have.
Yeah. So how do you guys line up as a couple and pray for not the same things, but in the same direction, and keep your faith strong as a couple? Mm-hmm. To use your favorite word, what's the formula for that?
Yeah, no, we pray. We're very, I think.
This is the next book, by the way.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, so, our big thing is truth tell, mind change, form change, confession, repentance, transformation. So I think the key for us is to really try and tell each other the deepest truth about what we're most afraid of in a situation. Like, that's really important. And that's very hard to do. I tell a person, if you want to love a person deeply, or tell them what you're most afraid of. If you want intimacy with another person, tell them what you're most afraid of. Just practice.
And not hypothetical things, but what you're going through in the current moment. What are you afraid of? And people, I say this jokingly, but while our heads are still on the pillow in the morning, Jamie looks at me and says, "What are you afraid of?" Mm-hmm. First thing he looks at me and says, "What are you afraid of?"
Because that's what'll hurt us in a day, is that fear. And so when we're thinking about something or praying about something, well, the very first thing we want to do is tell each other what we're most afraid of in a situation. And usually has nothing to do with the situation. It's more like, I'm afraid of being left behind. I'm afraid of being a disappointment. Like, those things have to move out of the way before you can say to God, what is it that I really need? Because what we do with God is self-protect and self-promote even when we pray. And it's so deeply trained in us that the real me's not even praying to God. It's very hard to get to that place where, Lord, I don't want to self-protect and self-promote with you. I want you to be free to explore even the deepest regions of my own heart. The heart is Jacob-like at every level, and it's a treacherous journey. Who can know it? We have to have God as our guide into the deep places of our heart. And he wants to go there, but he doesn't want us to go there alone, because we'll fall off the precipice of our treacherous heart. He wants to be the guide through that deep place. And so if you're going to be with another person in that journey, both of you have to have the Lord as the guide, but you have to both be willing to go to the deep places of your own heart. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to invite another person on that journey, they're going to have to know what's there as you go along the way.
And that fear's pointing to what you really believe. Yeah. It's pointing to what lie you really believe. Like Jamie gave 2 examples, like, I'm afraid I'm a disappointment, or I'm afraid I don't belong. Your current situation is not the source of that. You learned that somewhere way back in your childhood.
Yep.
And it became a belief system for you. And you need to experience Jesus where you first learned it to come into freedom, and then take that freedom and bring it forward into the present moment. And it's changing your belief system.
Yep.
And if you don't do that, then you're never going to really be able to conquer that fear. It's going to keep coming up. And
you're kind of praying in circles. So I know Donna's deepest fear. I know what it is. And she knows mine very deep. She knows my very deepest fear, and I know hers. And so even if we're saying, like, I feel like God's calling us to, inviting us to this situation, I know she'll never be afraid of that situation. If I said, I think God's inviting us to move to take on the tribal conflict in Yemen, she'll never be afraid of the tribal conflict in Yemen. Her fear is much deeper and personal than a location and who's there. So is mine. So is most people's. So when we're praying about anything, I'm saying, Lord, just protect her from her fear of the deep one. And she's doing the same thing for me. And when she says no to something, that's why she's saying no to it. It's not because it's this or that, or there's not enough money. It's because there's a deep feeling in her that this lie may happen there. Like
wow.
that. And when you know that about the people on your team, they're pretty invincible. They're pretty invincible because that's where the enemy's going to stop them. He'll never stop them in what happens. I think, we were talking about this morning together, but I think when Jesus is on the cross, his last and deepest prayer is, into your hands I commit my spirit. If you can't say that to God, you're going to self-protect with him. If you can't say to him, I throw myself into your mercy and protection at every level. If you can't say that, that means you got to protect at some level in relation to him. I pray that prayer. I'm like, in our bank of experience at this point with the Lord, I'm like, I don't care what happens. I'm not afraid to die at any level. I'm not afraid to die. I into your hands, I commit my spirit. Like, let's do this thing. Let's get it going. And I feel like that's what Paul's saying. To live this is the hard part. Like, to die, that's like the great part. When you make that shift and think, this is not worth protecting.
Right.
Gosh, that is such a relief when you get over that hill. And like, do you really want to beg God for another Monday here? Like, that's the most valuable thing you could ever get from God. You're insane. That's insanity. But when you're willing to like give this up to get that, now you're normal. But it's hard to get there because we're so enamored with this. And so, yeah, I was just thinking, like, we were abducted together one time, which now we look back is hilarious, but with our kids. And in that whole scenario, Donna would always say to me, if we get kidnapped, don't let them separate us. Like, if we ever got kidnapped, I would have control over the abductors going, we're willing to be abducted, but we're not going to be separated at any, like we're going to put our foot down on the separation part. Like Donna would like, give them the rules of the abduction before we get there. That's Donna's 6 in action.
Mine's forecasting the abduction.
And I'm like, let's just be abducted in any way possible. That's a 7, being abducted.
We'll make it fun. It'll be a game.
This is Enneagram for people who are
So then we get abducted, and of course they separated us. And Donna's like, don't let them separate us. I'm like, they're masked gunmen. They're not asking for a vote here. They're taking me there, and you're going there. But in that whole situation, it's interesting how it's slow. I find this in those situations, it slows down so that you can take each moment captive. That's so amazing to me. You know how it happens every time we've been in those kind of situations. It's like time doesn't control it. For us, time controls everything, but in truth, time doesn't really control anything. And so when you're in those places where God, his grace, you're at a deeper level of his grace, it's like time goes out the window and the whole thing slows down to where you can grab each moment and stay present. You can stay in the present because the present's very slow. And so like they're screaming and yelling and waving, their guns and all that stuff, and people are freaking out. But it's like you're in this kind of slow motion place, where you can like.
Well, maybe you were.
And our kids were. And our kids were in the slow motion. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, when you're the only woman and there's all these scary men, it's a little different.
So how have you built it? I'm going to put my cards out, and this may not be right, but it almost seems like you've gotten to a place where you almost instinctively do these things. Yes. Whereas like for me, I have to, like when you're talking about taking captive, I'm like, yeah. You're just taking captive subconsciously in your sleep at this point. But for me, it's very difficult. And I almost feel like I have to use the intellect to do it. How have you gotten yourself to the point where you're able to say like, yeah, into your hands I commit my spirit, and it's like it's almost it's part of your identity now. It's habitual.
That's right.
How did you do that?
I think it's any kind of training. It's any kind of discipleship. It's you practice in the small things, in the quiet times, the peaceful times. You practice and you practice and you practice. And this is what it's funny how people are like, we don't have any good discipleship anymore. It's the wrong kind of discipleship. It's like Jesus taking the disciples up into the Galilee. He doesn't want them in the heavy duty conflict of Jerusalem yet. They're not ready, but he takes them into the Galilee, but he puts them in pretty intense fear situation, puts them in and pulls them back out, puts them in and pulls them back out. He's trained in places where they're terrified and they're with people they would never want to be with in a million years, but then he pulls them back out of it. And then he shows them how to do it and he pulls them back out of it. It's like a good coach. And they're sitting in a classroom reading books about it. They're in it and then they're out of it. And then they're in it and out of it. And then he's reviewing it and training it in these quiet but intense places. building them for the day when he's okay, now we're going into Jerusalem. And so I feel like, I mean, it's kind of like how a child should be raised, but in discipleship programs, I think like this is why sports coaching and all that is so good, is like, and parents that so protect their kids is like not healthy, right? It's like, it's because you're so protected and guarded that nothing bad can happen to you, and God doesn't want anything bad to happen to you. But it's the way humans are made. You're trained and you're disciplined, and you get hurt and you fall down and you encounter mean people and you have guidance in it, but you're still allowed to experience it. That's what I feel like has to happen. And then, yeah, I think that's the way it is. And our kids are our kids were fortunate that they grew up in a world as Jewish kids in a Muslim world. Like they were kind of forced to realize, we have to live in a world that hates Jewish people, but we can be absolute best friends in this world. Like, why can't that happen? Why do we have to go by what's said? And so then, and wouldn't you say that's the discipleship program of God?
And talking about it being instinctual, that verse about taking every thought captive and making it obedient to Christ, I realized some years ago that means every thought, not just the bad thoughts, right? Take every thought captive. And so again, it comes back to that question of, what do you want me to know? What do you want me to know about your love? What do you want me to know about my identity? What do you want me to know about that person? Take every thought captive. And then live with intention into that obedience. And remember the word obedience, we equate it with punishment. I better obey or I'm in big trouble with God. But actually the Hebrew word means to listen and respond. So to listen and respond to God is better than sacrifice. He wants us to have that intimate relationship. So how does it become instinctual? It's just living with intention. And so, it's little deaths and resurrection. It's back to the fear question with this intention. It's recognizing that every day you're dying to yourself. You're not living in this self-protection and self-promotion. So when am I protecting myself against another person or against God? Die to that. Immediately recognize it, because it's a coping mechanism to what you're afraid of.
Yeah.
I'm afraid to be vulnerable. I'm afraid they're going to see a part of me that I don't want them to see. And it's this death and resurrection every day, getting ready for the big death and resurrection. I had this great mentor a long time ago who said, remember your baptism every day. Remember your baptism every day. You're going under the water, the old person that self-protects.
Yeah.
You're going down every day and coming up a new creation in Christ. Remember, it wasn't a one-time thing, never one and done. Remember it every day. And so it's just living with that intention and taking every thought, good and bad, take every thought captive.
That's good. You want to keep going? How you guys feel?
We feel great. Whatever you want to do. It's fun.
Can I keep going?
You want to give me an idea where we're going? Because I have some things I'd like to dissect. If you're going,
is it about what they just talked about?
Just now, not exactly.
All right, so I'll keep going and then write it down, and then we can circle back. Is that okay?
Yeah, we're good.
I think we need to end on evangelism.
That's where I'm going.
Yeah. Cool.
Evangelism.
I knew. See that? I knew where he was going.
As you're good.
You just taught me something. I'm going to share it with you real fast.
Okay.
I've trained a lot of business owners on building businesses and growing revenue and all of this, this stuff. But I always used to say, I always used to say this thing. I was like, the only thing that is not afraid is someone who's dead. As a way of being like, fear is actually part of the central nervous system, and it's a good thing. But what I just said is actually the gospel, because when you're dead, you don't have any fear. And that's the take up your cross, die to yourself, follow me. So you just fix something of like, I used to say it as like, you have to have a little bit of fear because you're alive. And what just repositioned in my brain is like, if we're dead, we don't have any fear.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll go fix that with a couple 100,000 people later,
I'll go make a note. to
Make
cut
sure you
that.
send it to me.
and I'll give you credit for it.
I don't need the credit. I just want to hear how
That
your
was
brain
just amazing.
processes
That was
it.
like that's you talk about paradigms. A paradigm happens in a moment, but then that algorithm goes and rewrites everything else.
That's right.
So I just had a couple thousand experiences get rewritten in about 10 seconds. So thank you for sharing that. Next
Good
question.
thing I led you to Christ.
Yeah.
Good thing.
Actually, thank you to Jamie for witnessing to
Yes.
you.
Thank you for that nurse in the hospital.
Oh my gosh. So when you're praying for things and you are being spirit led in what you pray for, do you guys, have you ever had an experience where you've prayed for something, you've prayed for a breakthrough or whatever, and you don't get it, or you get it in a way that's very different, not what you asked for?
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Can you take us through some of those?
Oh man.
Well, most recently, about 2 years ago, we felt really led, Jamie more strongly than me, but I didn't feel a no to it. So really supported Jamie, was to start a coffee shop in the little town that we live in, and got a lot of people really excited about it. And we put together this team and just did all the things you have to do. Business plan, found a guy had a roaster he donated it to. We started roasting beans, selling beans, found a location, just all the things, lawyers, bank accounts, investors. And in the end, it just didn't fly. Just problem after problem after problem. And it just didn't fly. And it just felt like a failure.
Mm-hmm.
And
that was like on my knees praying, had a vision while I was in
Both of
Dubai
us,
about
yeah.
starting it. Yeah.
yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a really hard experience for us, because it's like, did we hear God? Did we hear God wrong? Or did God lead us into this just so it wouldn't happen?
Fail. Yeah.
And yeah, it was a really hard experience. And then we found out that it wasn't just to start a coffee shop. It was to have where we live, there's no like gathering place type venue for small events where you can just do really cool stuff. And
Like I wanted to gather the Muslim community, and I wanted to have a place where educators could get together and talk about educational philosophy and the LGBT community. Like I wanted to have a place where we could really get into these different issues other than a church.
Yeah.
and there's just was no place like that.
It was a brilliant vision, God.
So then we find out, after we shut the whole thing down about a year later, Jamie's book's called Living Fearless. We find out about a year later, just a few months ago, that in the neighboring city, just 20 minutes away, that some guy started the exact same idea, and the name of it is Fearless Coffee and Cafe.
Wow.
And Jamie's met him and been out there a bunch of times. And I mean, he's doing exactly what we wanted to do. Yeah. And so you want to talk about what we learned?
Well, so yeah, so I mean, I never feel like I hear God wrong. I never go back and like, I heard you wrong. I know what I've been doing this long enough to like, I know what I heard. I know how the Lord communicates. I'm past like, was that you? Was that? I know what I heard. And my question is, now that we've done all that, now what do you want me to know? Like that, I actually brought the investors together and said, we're not going to go any further on this. This is not going to go. This is not the right thing. And I'm asking you to give all the money that you invested to the guy that owns the building and let him have it. Just let him keep it. I talked them all into doing it.
Wow.
Which they agreed. They're not my friends anymore, but they agreed to do that. And, no, actually, we actually have all met together again just recently. But so I didn't ever think I did the wrong thing. I like, it's just, I don't understand it. So I ask the Lord all the time, like, what about that coffee shop idea? What do you want me to know about that? Like, I don't understand it.
We've also learned never to say why.
Yeah.
Like God doesn't have to tell you why.
Yeah.
Who can know the thoughts of God?
Yeah.
He never has to tell you why. But that question, what do you want me to
He'll always
know?
tell you what he wants you to know about something.
Is the
and so
game
I've been
changer.
asking him a lot lately about it, because he told me 2 things to do, and the other one I'm still working on. And so I was asking about it. And then 2 of the investors said, hey, this guy started this coffee shop. It's really good. You ought to go visit. It's called Fearless Coffee. So they took me, 2 of the investors took me to meet this guy. He's a great guy. Loved the guy. and it's a great place. And it's very much what we envisioned. And so I go to meet with them, and I'm sitting with them, and he says to me, I read your book, Jamie. I loved it. It's helped me a lot in my life. If there's anything I can do to help you with this coffee shop. And I said, well, kind of what I wanted to do was get the Muslim leaders together. And so he's going to do it. We're going to do it. And I said, and I wanted to get educated. He goes, that would be the greatest dream of mine. So everything that I envisioned, this guy's doing really well, probably better. Plus, I don't have to do it. And so I was, and he said, maybe I just do it better than you, which hurt my feelings. But I was like, yeah, you probably do. And then I remembered the passage where in the scripture where it says the prophets realized that the things they were envisioning were not for them.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine seeing the Messiah and the vision of it and realizing you're never going to see it? Wow. It's not for you. And so I just felt like all the Lord said to me was like, not everything that I say is for you. But the process that you went through with the people involved, it's all beneficial. I use everything, but just remember that just not every vision is for you to do, but to pay attention for that vision when it comes or to talk about it. And so I've already met with other people to get them to meet in this coffee shop, and we're going to do everything I dreamed of. It's just like the Lord saying to me, aren't you glad you aren't in charge of the coffee shop? Like, aren't you glad you're not financially tied to it? And then the guy tells me the story, the guy that owns the coffee shop, of how when he was little, his dad abandoned the family and his mom would have to drop them off while she went to work. And she would drop them off as little kids at this coffee shop. And the coffee shop in his mind is the kingdom, and his whole life.
Wow.
He's wanted to rebuild that place.
Wow.
What in the world?
Well, it's beautiful. And
Isn't
so
that
now
amazing?
he's thrilled that I have this dream of how to get the Muslim leaders in there. So next week we're having a meeting with the Muslim leaders on we're going to start meeting at the coffee.
That is so cool.
So it all worked together.
And one of the big takeaways is when it doesn't work out how you don't imagine, and the enemy's right there.
Yep.
You're a failure. You're a failure.
Right.
You're a
Every time
failure.
you heard wrong, you
and
heard
just
wrong.
because something fails doesn't mean that you are a failure.
Yeah.
And recognizing that failure is learning. Failure is learning. Just like I always compare it to riding a bike. Who knows how to ride a bike? Every single person in this room. How many people fell off the bike when they were learning, right?
Yep.
That doesn't mean you're a failure at riding a bike. It means you learned how to ride a bike really well, right?
Yeah.
And it's so easy for us to take on that false identity of I'm a failure and give up, And so then we're afraid next time we sense the Lord's telling us to do something,
Yep.
we're going
to do it.
Yeah.
Right?
So I love how it worked out. It's so beautiful. It makes me want the Lord to say something else to me again, so I can figure out, now what are you saying? It makes me want to go deeper into understanding before I launch into it.
Yeah.
We also brought a beautiful team together of people that really needed something to work on.
Yep.
They were struggling with other things in their lives and needed a purpose and
It was fun.
needed to be in relationship as
That's
a
a
team. So that was
beautiful
beautiful.
story.
So I say to Dawn every day, don't you wish we were getting up at 5 a.m. to go to a coffee shop? And she's like, no.
No.
So glad that
Kind
worked.
of never wished it, but
That was our
I
big
love you.
Yeah,
Yo.
exactly. Yes, no. Oh, that's a great story. I love what you said too about being careful to ask God why. I was in this season where I was asking God why, and I felt like the Holy Spirit said, understanding is sequential. You won't even get it.
Yeah, that's right.
You won't even get it.
Yeah.
And so it's like we want him to respond with his reasoning, and then we wouldn't even understand the reasoning.
That's right.
So a better question is, what do you want me to know? Because then he can sequentially tell us what we would understand in that moment,
Right.
to lead us to the next thing.
That's right.
So wise.
Which is awesome.
Right.
Yeah,
I love
so
that.
wise.
And it should be encouraging to people watching this that the things that God takes you through are more of an indication of what he wants to do through you in the future and less of an indication of your skill or your training or any of that stuff.
Exactly.
And that'll help clean up some of that failure syndrome.
Yeah, that's right. And as you're down the road, I tell people, younger people, it's like, I can't tell you how this thing's going to work out. All I can tell you is it will. Don't quit.
Yeah.
Just don't quit.
Great
Just stay
advice.
in the river, we say. The river's moving. Don't get out of the river. Stay in it. Don't push. You can't push the river. Stay in it. And I'm telling you, it's going somewhere.
Yeah.
I promise you, just don't quit.
And when you hit the rapids, hang on.
Hold on.
Just hang
And
on.
if you're a business owner, don't quit, but also don't try to control the river
That's right. Yeah,
because you can't.
that's right.
And that's a recipe for just unhappiness.
Amen.
Yeah.
Trying to control everything.
Yep.
Cool. You want to?
So
Sorry
there's
to
a
interrupt
couple
you.
things that I've noticed throughout this conversation that are fascinating to me. And I know for me, I'm hearing these stories and I just get really I get ramped up. I'm like, let's go. But in those themes are evangelism and hearing from God. Those are like the 30-foot perspective things I see. And I speaking for myself and probably other people listen to these stories and they're like, man, I really want to be a part of that. But there's actually some really key tools that I'd love for us to hit really quick and dissect from you guys while we're here. First thing is, Jamie, one of the things that stood out to me about your story with Donna is your way of evangelizing wasn't just based off of, here's how I think, I'm going to give this to you, take it or leave it. I think that's normal right now. And I think we have an opportunity to change that in this conversation.
Apologetics.
Yeah,
Right.
that's right.
So my thought process, obviously you had a thought process then, it's probably just slightly different now. And I want to know, what is your thought process now when you're reaching different people groups? Is it like, do you have to read all of their books? Like how do you even begin, like step 1, step 2, begin to even think about how do I reach this people group?
Yeah. Yeah. So I can answer this from way down the road. I hope we can save people a lot of time on this. The guys that saved us a lot of time, that were like 15 years ahead of us and saved us so much agony, I wanna like pay them back. So this is when we first like went into the Muslim world, it was a lot about apologetics and polemics, read all their books, figure out what's wrong with their books, attack their books, prove our books, that kind of thing. Yeah. But a pastor friend of ours said, how many of you that are married, apologetics and polemics is basically why I'm right and why you're wrong. How many of you use apologetics and polemics when you're talking to your spouse and it works out well?
It's great for conversation.
Honey, this is why I'm right.
And this is why you're wrong. And that goes well. And it doesn't.
So why would you do that on anybody in an initial conversation?
Especially
there might be a place for it later.
Yeah.
But not in an initial conversation.
So that's not just a good idea. Later, when you're trying to demonstrate something, it's helpful. But so that's never really worked. We called it attack and extract. Attack them and then extract them into your team. It always ends in conflict. So that's not the right way to do it. Plus, isn't what Jesus does. So what
key point.
Yeah, what we figured out, and this I would just say this to anybody, whether you're talking to a Muslim or a Hindu or an atheist or gay, straight, doesn't matter. They're a human being, and so the less you talk to them as they're part of a team, and just as a human, the way faster it goes. As soon as you name a team in the conversation, you're creating greater conflict, right? As soon as I name them as part of a team or me as part of a team, it's just like if I say, I'm going to tell you Christian truth, you've already lost them because now you're saying all truth belongs to Christians. So that's like damaging. Truth doesn't belong to anybody. It's what's true. Truth is truth. So I like to say to people, we're going to talk about what's true and what's not true. That's all we're ever going to talk about. And here's what truth does to human beings. Knowing and experiencing truth has one effect on humans. It sets them free. That's what it does. So in our whole conversation, we just want to talk about what's true and what's not true. So here is what is true about humans. The thing that hurts us more than anything else is fear. So if I ask any human, Muslim, it doesn't matter, what are you most afraid of? Whatever you're going to say back to me, I understand. I'm going to understand what you say. It doesn't matter how you were raised, where you were raised, when you were raised, because that fear is going to be the fear that we've all struggled with. And that's going to be our unifying place where we're going to join together. So that's why I don't ask Donna, do you love me every morning? Because God knows what that means. But I ask her, are you afraid of anything? What are you afraid of today? Because that's the place where we're going to be the most intimate through the day. Because that's the place where she needs the closest companionship, is in that place. That's where the enemy is. That's where the potential conflict is for her, me, all of that right there. So here's the passage in the Bible that just did it for me more than even like I love watching Jesus talk to people, but the passage that really affected me in my walk was, Donna said it, it's not about evangelism, it's about sharing your faith. Think you're sharing your faith. So Paul, when he's getting on the ship to go to Rome, right? He doesn't have to go to Rome.
In Acts.
Yeah, in Acts 27:28. He gives his testimony and he claims Roman citizenship. And they said if he didn't claim Roman citizenship, he'd really be not guilty. But because he's claimed Roman citizenship, we have to send him to Caesar. So here we go. So they put him on the boat. So if you think of him on the ship, in the ethnography of the ship, he's the bottom of the ship. He's a prisoner. He's a Christian, all that stuff. He's at the bottom of the ship. He has zero influence in the ethnography of the ship. At the top of the ship are the owners, the captain, the centurion, the captain of the ship, all the sailors, everything. He's the bottom guy. So when he gets on the ship, he has no voice, no influence, nothing. By the end of the trip, he runs the entire ship. How? By sharing his faith. How? He only speaks 4 times in the whole trip. 4 times. And he goes like that. And nobody on the ship believes in his God until the end of the trip. What does he say? It's just brilliant what he does. And so all he says, he sees the condition of the weather and all of that. And here's his first statement to the group. I can tell you right now, this is not going to go well. That's his only statement. And they're like, you don't know what you're talking about. We're experts. We know what we're doing. Like, that's all he says is like this. I'm going to tell you guys the truth about the situation that you're in. It's not going to go well. But here we go. The key to him is he's incarnational through the whole disaster. He doesn't stand over here yelling at people, telling them that what they're doing is wrong. He's in the storm with them the whole time. That's another key. You got to be incarnational into the people you're talking to. You have to be with them. You can't be like traveling through town yelling at people. Like, he's in the situation with them. Like, so I tell people, like, if you're going to be a witness, be with them.
Yeah.
Like, this is key to Jesus, is like, he's right there with you. So he's in the ship and then it starts to go, and the passage is just beautiful. And every time he speaks, he comes up like this. But what's critical is the reason he knows he's not going to die in the hurricane, because he can hear God talking to him about his own journey and his own life. That's all he's doing. He's saying, I'm going to make it to Rome. How do you know? Because in my quiet time, I know I have to speak before Caesar. All I'm saying is I'm going to make it no matter what happens. If you guys will stay with me, you'll make it too. That is sharing your faith at the highest level. You don't have to agree with everything about my theology, but I'm telling you, if you stay with me, we're all going to make it. So he keeps saying, the God that I serve, the God that I served. You don't have to serve him. You don't have to believe in him yet, but stay with me and watch what he does. This is sharing your faith. And slowly they start taking the faith as their own. It's so beautiful. It's so powerful how he does it. And to even at the end, when the centurion is even following his orders. So for me, when I'm talking to a person, this is what I know about every single person I'm talking to, no matter where they're from. They're operating in a separation worldview and a false identity. I know that about the person I'm talking to. I don't have to ask them where they're from, what they believe in, what they were raised in. I know those 2 things about them. They're operating in a scarcity worldview, and they have a wrong view of themselves. I know it. And so all I have to do is help them see how they're thinking and why they're afraid, and then, which is a lie, and then tell them the truth about what's real, just like Paul's doing. And I'm just saying, let me just share my faith with you. The situation that you're in, it's going to end in conflict and disaster, I'm telling you. But over here, in what's true, there is enough for you. And it's a mystery, and we're not going to figure the whole thing out, and that's okay. And you're going to fail, and it's okay. All that's okay. But there's enough for you. And if you will just connect with God and with other people, you're going to be fine. And people respond to it. When we started doing that with Muslims, and the God, he wants to connect. He's already connected to you. You just don't know it. You're separate here. He's with you. He'll talk to you right now. Like that Muslim, like, what do I do with these? What do I do with this? I'm disconnected. No, you're not. Do this and watch. And they'll scream. I can hear him. Yes. He's always been there. That's every human to do that with. So it's the good news. It's definitely the euangelion, the good news. But that's what, to me, sharing, we're saying, I have faith in this and I'm willing to share it with you until it becomes your own. And here's what I believe, that I was separate and alone and powerless and alone. And it's not true. It's never been true. And let me tell you, this is how I know it. And I'll walk with you in this storm, and then it can become your own journey.
Wow.
So beautiful. It's so simple and so beautiful, and people thirst for it.
And it's not a thing that you go out and do.
Right.
It's your life.
Yeah.
And, we always say being informs doing. And if you understand that connected lifestyle, that connected worldview, that you're connected to God, that you're enough, that the kingdom life is a mystery and it's other focused, then it just flows out of you. And there's no such thing as evangelism. You're ready to give an answer for the hope that's within you, and you're just overflowing your identity all the time. And people are attracted to it like a magnet.
Yeah.
And so there should never be a class on evangelism. We should never have anything like that. The class should be like the most basic element of our faith is learning how to hear from God. And we never start with that. We start with theology, in some discipleship class. But if we started with how to tune in to the communication of God, how to perceive how he speaks to us, which is all different ways, then it's such good news that you want to tell everybody.
Yeah.
That's the good news of the gospel.
I was talking to a guy the other day, just a stranger. We were just having this conversation, and he was telling me, I said, tell me what he's I'm a musician, want to be a musician, and he's in his 30s, and how'd it go? And he goes, it was rough. And I said, I moved to Nashville and, was doing pretty well. And I said, tell me when you discovered like you weren't enough. Oh man, you should have seen his face. He's like, oh. And I said, what, like when, like you just weren't going to make it. When did you discover that? And he's like, wow. And I said, and how did that make you feel? And you could just see his broken heart.
Wow.
Like right there is where the good news comes. The Holy Spirit hovers over the chaos of the person's heart. And so just find the chaos. That's where the Spirit's going to move, right there in that place. Good. When did you realize that you were not enough? And then that's where the Spirit is waiting to create order and then fill it. Create order and then fill it. That's where the Spirit is, right there. And so if you can get them to speak to that chaotic place, we all know that chaos. Yeah, that's where the Spirit is. And then you just, man, in my chaos, this is where this, my deepest fear, this is where I met the Lord in the hurricane of my faith, like that. All humans have it. It's so gorgeous to talk to. I mean, you're good at doing that and sharing your story.
Did I tell you that I used one of your playbooks at a business event not too long ago?
I heard you talk about it on a podcast.
Yeah.
It was
Somebody
great.
sent it to us.
Yeah, I love it.
It was terrifying at first for me. And then I had a realization in this moment that I was like, I think everyone in the world is looking for Jesus. They just don't know his name or his personality.
That's right.
Like,
that's right.
They're hunting for him in psychedelics, and they're hunting for him in business, and they're desperate for him.
Yes.
And the only people that I've found who don't want Jesus is because they feel like they already know him from a counterfeit standpoint.
Exactly. And they're the hard ones.
They're the
brilliant.
hard ones. And then they will struggle to hear God because they're afraid of what they think he's going to tell them.
Yeah.
Guilt and condemnation.
That's like the Muslim girl in the dark talking. And then the redhead says, who are you talking to? I don't know, but he's nice. Ask him who he is.
Yeah.
It's Jesus. Right.
Yeah.
He's been there the whole time.
And you can tell when a person notices that it's Jesus because it's this relief of like, that's what I was wanting in psychedelics. That's what I was wanting in this. And like the paradigm, the algorithm begins to rewrite, and you can see it in someone's eyes where they're just like, I didn't know that I could have this all the time and that I didn't have to go earn it.
Yeah.
And those are some of my favorite moments now are
Yeah.
using some of the principles I've learned from you on just rich business owners who are
Yeah.
like, wow, I can't believe that Jesus wanted to talk to me. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, he loves to talk to you.
Yeah.
Loves it.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah.
That's the most beautiful part about sharing your faith is that.
Yeah.
Like if you understand that, it's so joyful to do it, right? It's so much fun. When we were in other organizations and you got to go out and knock on doors or approach people on the beach, it's like painful because it's so not
Relational.
it's not the kingdom. It's this transactional. But wow, when you're just like this is the greatest. I know you're thirsty. This is the greatest thing you'll ever drink.
Yep.
This is so powerful.
And then
So
you
good.
don't, what I find is the people who do this, like, they don't even always understand how it's multiplying because they're like, well, I'm not marketing it. I don't have a marketing budget. It's like, bro, there's 12 disciples. They went into the entire world and they didn't have a marketing budget.
Yeah, that's right.
No one could stop talking about what had happened. This is the story of the family who's like, I want to talk to God now. Who everyone wants that.
Yeah, that's right.
And when they feel it, what do you want to do when you find something great? You want to tell your friends about it.
Yeah,
And there's no Facebook ads necessary for it.
That's
It's
right.
just they start telling everyone.
yeah,
You know?
Yeah.
And so it's like you talk about the nurse all the time. And I think for many years I'll talk about you because of this yellow book that a friend of mine sent to me.
yeah,
And even me, like raised in this environment, I just didn't know that it was this accessible.
yeah.
I just, what do you mean you just talk to God and confess what you're afraid of? Like, what do you mean? That's too simple.
Yep.
Like, you don't learn that in any theology that doesn't take you closer to Jesus is in most rights kind of a scam. Like, what's the point?
That's
If
right.
you're going to learn about God and not get closer to God, that's not the gospel here.
If it doesn't work in real life, it doesn't work.
What's the point?
Yep.
No point.
Exactly right.
Your experience has to match the theology.
Yes. Do you have any other questions? I know where we're going to land.
Yeah, the last thing I was going to ask is one of the things that I think is so interesting about you guys is you guys in some ways live a little bit of a chaotic life at times. Sometimes your life gets really crazy. And you mentioned very specifically that Jesus was so good at taking the disciples to places of peace and quiet and then introduce them to chaos to see how the instincts go from the training. And you said something that was very bold and very confident that I loved, that you were like, no, I don't hear God wrong. Most people, one, they don't believe that's a possible place to get to. Two, they probably think you're lying. So I don't think you're lying. But my question is, I'm sure at the beginning it was probably really hard.
Yes.
And you were doubting yourself and your thoughts are warring and your desires. And I know there's even been times in my life where I'm pretty sure I heard God wrong or my thoughts were in the way. And so my question was like, I know this is a huge question, so you might have to answer at a pretty high level, but what have you learned from talking to God for so long versus what you thought it was at the beginning?
Yeah. I mean, it's, like I always give the example of like learning to hear God is like learning to hear anything. So like when I was a rookie cop and you had to hear your number called on the radio, and, I was in a big department with lots of radio chatter all the time and lots of different precincts talking. And my number was 510 and my FTO would say, you got to listen, you got to hear your number called. It's your lifeline and it's how you know where to go and what to do. And you got to speak calmly and they got to talk, it's like, and I'm like, okay. And he said, they've called you 3 times. They've already called you 3 times and you don't even hear it. And so if you put me on a polygraph and say, did they call you? I would pass the polygraph saying no, because I didn't hear it. And I would say, they never called me. And I would be telling the truth, except I'm wrong. So people say God doesn't speak and you're wrong. You're 100% wrong, but I didn't hear him. That's true, but it isn't because he wasn't speaking. It's because you didn't hear. Because you're trained to hear other voices really well, but not that one. And so I would have to sit in a parking lot on midnight shifts with my FTL like this, with my ear down by the radio, waiting to hear my number, like, because they're calling. My number was 510, 520, 610, 710, 810, all these numbers, 510. And I would go, there it is. And he would go, great, congratulations. Now, can you drive and do that? Like, that's another level. I got to drive and do. Can you get in a high speed pursuit? and talk and hear that number, like that's where we're going. That's what hearing from God is like. That's what Jesus is teaching those disciples.
Whoa.
Yeah, you can hear it right here. Good. Can you hear it now? Can you, like that kind of thing? And so everything in life is, God doesn't violate the rules. Like the way you learn anything is at the most basic level, and then you train. And however hard you want to train is the highest level you'll go. But if you want to quit the training right there, there you are. That's where you end right there. So if I want to hear God in East Tennessee and that's all, that's the end of the training. But if you want to hear him in Baghdad, well, that's another level of training. And so at this point in my life, like here, I know his voice. Because it's weird when we were in Jerusalem, when we were training at a certain level there, Donna was going to learn, to relearn Hebrew. That's where she felt like the Lord wanted her. And I felt like the Lord wanted me to go walk around and pick up trash. Like that was pretty clear. I want you to walk around and pick up trash, which is about basically pretty much where he dispatched both of us. You go learn Hebrew and you go pick up trash. That was like, okay, not a lot of debate in that skill set. And so I would pick up trash and I would be walking through an intersection and I would, hear is a weird word, but I would sense, see that plastic cup in the middle of that intersection, go out there and pick it up. And I would have to wait for the traffic, run out there and pick up that cup. But I knew that if I couldn't hear him say, pick up that cup, we would never have met the woman that we were describing earlier. You have to be able to hear at that level to meet her. But practice, pick up that cup. Because if you miss that, okay, we'll do that again and we'll practice that again and again. So that when he said, you need to go talk to that woman right there, I would be ready to hear that, right? That's the way all training goes. So God's not going to give you this magic hearing all of a sudden, because that's not the truth of the world that he set up. So you train and you train like that. So I recognize his voice. I know Donna does. But what's really important is when you sense him speaking to you, like I will say out loud, okay, I'm going to say back to you what I think you just said to me, and I will repeat it back. Is that correct? Then I will say to Donna, my sense from God is this. Does that make sense? And to my community, all these checks. Does that make sense to me? Yes, it makes sense to me. Does that make sense to my identity? Yes, it makes sense to my identity. Does that make sense to all of you? And if it's, yeah, it makes sense. It's weird, but it makes sense. So like you have all these beautiful ways to check it. But the most important is, Lord, search the deepest recesses of my dark heart. Is there anywhere in there that this is coming from that's not from you? That's key. That is key. And you have to let him search. Because the heart is a treacherous place.
Yeah.
And it's got deep, dark places. It's not deceitful above all things, bad translation. It's manipulative.
Tricky.
It's tricky.
It's tricky.
And it needs the Lord to guide you through it. He wants to guide you through it, but you have to let him guide you. And I find that people that get messed up is that because they won't let the Lord really search them. And so some of the motivations get mixed up, but I think the practice, the discipline is like, even this morning I was saying, Lord, I want to say to you things in my heart. I just want to lay them out there, because the whole time through substance abuse and all that is when you've got this whole level that nobody's going in. Nobody's going in, not even God. And when that breaks open and the Lord's free to go wherever he wants, then you really can trust his voice. But it's work. It's all discipline.
And I just want to add, when you're asking your community about it, you're not just saying, I heard God tell me to move to wherever God
to Franklin.
Yeah, to Franklin. What's your
yes?
What's your opinion of that? I'm not asking your opinion. What I'm really asking, does it line up with the character of God? I don't want to know your opinion. I want to know, help me discern. Does it line up with the character of God? Does it line up with what principles of Scripture? Does it resonate with me personally? Does it cause condemnation, guilt, shame? Because that's not the voice of the Lord. Right. Never causes guilt and shame or condemnation. And so you need someone objective to ask you back those questions, not just your opinion. Like when we sense the Lord telling us to move to Baghdad, you better believe we got a lot of opinions like, you are poor stewards of the children God gave you. Mm-hmm. You
That's
are
what our elders told us.
You are emotionally unstable. I mean,
That's
these
what
are
Donna's dad told us.
these are the opinions that we got. But is it in line with the character of God to go somewhere? Is it line up with scriptural principles? Did it resonate with us? We couldn't wait to do it when we heard about the opportunity. So that's what Jamie means when get your community involved. Yeah. Anyway, I have a lot to say on the topic, but
so good.
Jamie
to wrap
did it
that,
great.
Jamie, how long has that probably been when you first heard the voice of God, and how long has it been till now?
I mean, I could, in the police department, when I was in my late 20s, on the police department, I had a real good sense of the Lord's directing. It was general. It was general, sometimes pretty specific. But to get into the real details wasn't until after, the trial was when I really started paying attention. And then when we got into our second years in Indonesia, where we met these folks that really taught, you got to have a model for these things. You have to have someone in front of you going, this is how you do this. This is how you practice this. Otherwise, I don't know how to. I mean, you have to have someone to mentor you.
We always had like a sense
every human
from
has
God,
it.
Yeah.
but we didn't know like listening prayer was super.
You have to have
scary.
a Yoda in front of you, really telling you.
And
every
also-
hero has a guide. Every hero has to have a guide. Yeah.
And also realizing like God speaks through your imagination. He speaks through feelings. Actually, like a word, getting an actual, move to Baghdad.
More rare.
Yeah.
Is really rare and not that reliable. It's not that reliable. It's more like your grandest idea, your highest thought that this is how God speaks to you, or a feeling of peace, of great peace. We always say when we heard this speaker at this event talking about the opportunities in Baghdad, and I just immediately started crying, and I looked over at Jamie and he was just profusely sweating. And so now I say one of the ways God speaks is just moisture pours out of your body. Like that's how you know God's speaking to you.
Wow.
But we forget this verse that says we have the mind of Christ. So whenever you have a really great idea, especially if it's benefiting other people, this is God speaking to you. This is not you just coming up with it by yourself, right? And
people don't realize how many times God has spoken to them,
That's
but
right.
they didn't recognize that it was God.
Then they dismiss it.
And the other thing,
Yeah.
another thing I've just realized recently is, people look to the experts, these Christian leaders to kind of tell them what God wants them to know. Or, we look to the Christian celebrities for this kind of wisdom and knowledge when you are the expert. You are the expert at hearing God's voice for you. Nobody can tell you what God's voice sounds like for you. God has a unique love language, for lack of a better term, for each person. Jamie will be she said it to me yesterday, he'll be in the shower or be asleep, and he will actually see written words. He's a writer. I mean, I never see a word written out like that. I'll see things in my imagination or feel a feeling, but I'm a real feelings-oriented person. So it's super unique to each person. You can't compare your experience to another person's experience when it comes to hearing from God.
I've got a final question, but I'll touch on this real fast to help with that question and put more context on it. The first time I remember hearing from God and knowing that it was God was I think May of 2022.
Wow.
When we were on the beach. And it wasn't something I wanted God to tell me.
Yeah. That happens.
I wish it would have been like a better message. In fact, I was like, there's no way that this is God. God would never tell me to do something that is dangerous. I hadn't read your book yet. Well, now I'm like, everything he says is dangerous. Like, okay.
Gonna
That's
stretch
like a
you.
heuristic. But once I read your book, it was random. So me hearing from God, that was like the first time I remember it, but then it felt random. Like I would hear from God, but I didn't know how to do it on an ongoing basis. And once I read your book, I started asking God to train me. I was like, teach me how to do this. And for a while, it would be like right before a storm, you can smell the rain and you can see the clouds. And every time that it would get like that in the weather, I would hear God in the way that I was thinking and feeling.
Wow.
And I was like, well, that's interesting. I don't understand why that would be connected. That kind of seems, a little bit new agey. And then God took me to the verse where God is trying to get Samuel's attention. But he doesn't recognize that he thinks it's Eli.
Yeah.
So like God was saying, when I want to talk to you, I will get your attention. You have to pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
And then it changed. It wasn't the weather anymore. It was this chair. Every time I would sit in this chair, I would get like just convicted by the Holy Spirit. But the conviction was so awesome. It wasn't shameful. And then it would change and it would be in my truck. Every time I was in the truck, we called the truck Bernadette. My 6-year-old named it. And I'd be just driving to the grocery store, just hearing the stuff. Like, I can't remember all of this stuff. So I'm noticing the same pattern where God's like, I need to, when I speak to you, I will call your name in some way. And you'll begin to feel tuned in. So I think people a lot of times will, if you're listening to this, you'll notice that this is happening. Like, like the couple days ago, I just felt really like sober. And like I was thinking that something was about to happen. Well, that's Holy Spirit's calling your name.
Yeah.
It's getting your attention. He's trying to teach you how like, God wants to speak about something. And it's up to us to begin to go through that protocol and learn.
Yes.
This is what it feels like when God speaks. It doesn't feel like when Jamie says something. God has a signature and he's trying to teach you how to listen to 510. That's the number.
Right. Yes.
So when that happens, I need to slow down and be like, what are you trying to say?
What do you want me to know?
What do you want me to know right now? And it's still, for me, it's random. Like, it's not like I wake up every morning, I have coffee and I pray and God's like, I'm ready to talk at 6:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's random.
Right.
It is for us too.
It would be at the gym. I was on the bench press a couple weeks ago. And I was like, oh my gosh, here we go. Like, I can tell. And I texted my wife, said, I've been in the bathroom for 20 minutes and I'm crying. She's like, are you okay? Like, do you need help? And I was like, no, God just showed me something, So it's not always based on our convenience.
Oh, no. Yeah.
And unless we will submit our calendar, it's going to be very hard for us to go to the next place.
You're right.
Yeah. One time we were staying at someone's house and I wanted God to talk to me about something, and I would go into this room and I would actually get down on my knees and put my head on the floor. And he said to me, I'm not going to talk to you while you're alone in a room. I'm not going to talk to you. I don't want you sitting in a room. I want you have to be walking around. I'm not going to talk to you alone in a room. And he rarely talks to me alone in a room. It's almost always out somewhere where I'm walking around. And it took me a while to understand that, but it's because my family are very solitary people. They don't have friends. My dad totally alone until he died. They don't communicate with other people. And so God protects me from living in solitude, which I would probably. Yeah. So I married the most extroverted socialite in the world. But he said, when I talk to you, I'll talk to you when you're out there in the world. It's a protection to me.
Wow.
Otherwise I'd be some kind of monk.
Just writing
just sitting by myself. Yeah. And so, I think that's really cool how he definitely, that's a good, I like that observation. He definitely does get your attention.
And you said something interesting. Jamie's book, Living Fearless, is divided into 4 sections. And the first section is called attention. And the second section is awareness. And you're saying that process. He gets your attention. He's making you aware of something. And then the third section is about him speaking to you, enunciation. And then comes the action. We want the action part. Tell us what to do. Tell us what to do.
Give me the solution.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Okay. Thank you guys for being here.
Yeah.
Oh,
Great.
it's fun.
This is amazing.
Thank you for having us.
I've learned so much. I was praying about how God wanted us to end this. And last time I feel like Holy Spirit took us in one direction, which wasn't on my notes. And now we're going in another direction, which luckily God gave to me before. So I don't have to pivot in the middle. But I was asking, what do you want us to do on this show? Like, what do you want the message to be? So I want to end here. And the phrase that I heard Holy Spirit say was, I want you to show them, the audience, that they can trust me. And so we can start with you. But if there was a parting story or something God has shown you? Because here's what we wrestle with is, can I trust God? Once we can hear him, then it's about, well, I can know God as king, but I don't trust him as a dad. And that's where people get stuck. And so how would you show people that they can trust God no matter what it looks like?
Yeah, the biggest moment or period of time in my life of trusting God was being a witness to Jamie's process of coming into his true identity and actually wholeness and resiliency. As the years of our marriage grew and accumulated, I was a witness to him becoming more and more dependent on alcohol, which became problematic. I don't think anybody else in our world could really tell that, except, maybe our family. But it was heartbreaking for me. And as close as we were, and in the different situations we were living in other countries, that became a coping mechanism for him. And I begged God to remove it from him. And I really saw the situation getting worse. And it was just a big wedge between us. Jamie, we're talking now about fear and what are you afraid of? That was the biggest fear in my life. And I thought it would destroy us and destroy our family and the work that we were doing. And that was my hardest area to trust God for. And I just thought he was ignoring me. I just thought he was ignoring me and not answering my prayer. Now in hindsight, there's a scripture that says God doesn't count slowness as we do. 1,000 years is but a day is but 1,000 years. And then we had this experience where we were in Kuwait at a conference, and Jamie was about to speak, and the pastor that was organizing the conference had this little woman from India pray over everybody. And she went around and she touched, there was about 8 of us in a circle, and she touched each person's head with her thumb, and then she prayed in Hindi or whatever language that she spoke. You couldn't understand her. She had on a sari. And she was about maybe 4 feet, 10 inches tall. She was really short. And she reached up and she put her thumb on Jamie's head and prayed for him. And I didn't notice anything. And this was still during that period where he was struggling with alcohol. And then she prayed for me and went around. And then we went to where we were supposed to be in the conference. And we got in this glass elevator. And Jamie was terrified of heights. And we're in this glass elevator on, I don't know, like the 10th floor of this building. And he's standing back by the door. And I had my face, on the glass. And he said, something happened to me when that lady prayed for me. And God told me that I'm going to fall and it's going to be terrible. And I'm just begging you to stay with me. Don't leave me in the fall. And I knew this was the day I had been praying for. And I'm so grateful I didn't give up. I could have given up and walked away. How many marriages break up because of these issues? And how many wives walk away or husbands walk away? And, I guess that bank of experience we talked about before, I knew God was teaching me something through it. And one of my spiritual gifts, we talked about faith earlier, is faith. And if any of your listeners know about the Enneagram, I'm a 6 on the Enneagram, and a 6 is the loyalist. It's like the most valuable thing to me is loyalty. And I loved Jamie too much. He's the love of my life. I could never walk away. We said vows for better or for worse. And how could I ever walk away? And that was the moment I had been waiting for. And it was probably another year before that fall happened. And it was horrible. It was the hardest experience of our life. But would I do it again? I'd do it again in a skinny minute.
Yeah, you
Because of what we learned. And that was 13 years ago, 11 years ago.
almost 12. Yeah.
Almost 12 years ago. And our life took off. We lost everything 12 years ago till we had $0 in the bank and we were living in a garage apartment. It's like we were college students again. And this was after 30 years of marriage. And our life took off after that. I mean, we had to struggle a little bit, but then Jamie wrote the book. We started Identity Exchange from that experience. Jamie then, several years later wrote that he never could have written the book if he hadn't gone to rehab and entered sobriety. And was it worth it? God, it was so worth it. And God was faithful the whole time. And yes, I would go through it again in a skinny minute. Jamie was worth it.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Well, you got to beat that.
I would say the same thing, the same story, because when that lady touched me, the Lord said to me, He said, I was so vivid. It was weird because she was electricity when she touched me, and He said, the Lord said to me, "You're afraid of heights," and I said, "I know, I'm afraid of heights because my dad, to make us brave." When we were young, would make us climb this lighthouse when we were elementary. And in the old days, there was no guardrail. I mean, we had to climb this thing, and we were more afraid of him beating us than not climbing that thing. And it just made me terrified of heights because we had to do it. And so I'm that's going through my mind. And the Lord said, He said, "You're not really afraid of heights. You're afraid to fall." And I said, "Okay." And He said, but your fear of falling is what's preventing you from me taking you as high as you can go. And because of that, the alcohol is protecting you from your fear of, and so you're self-destructing actually before I can take you high because you're afraid. And so I'm going to take away your fear of falling. And I said, okay. And He said, but I'm going to push you off a cliff to do it, to show you that I'll catch you at the bottom. He said, but I want you to say yes. You have to say yes. Because all through the years of that, substance abuse, he was with me the whole time. And he would say to me, I would be intoxicated. And he would say, he'd be Jesus would be right next to me going, "Let me know when you want to stop this because I'm ready. Anytime you want to stop this, let me know." And I would tell him no.
He could hear God's voice in the middle of it.
Oh, yeah. I would tell him
what
no.
I think is important for people to know. He was never disconnected.
That's why I say people all the time, there's nowhere in the Bible where people can't find God's will. There's nowhere in the Bible where we wanted to know your will, we just couldn't figure it out. Nowhere. What's in the Bible is people that know exactly what it is and say no. That's all there is. That we're grasshoppers in our own eyes. That's the only thing that happens. God never doesn't reveal what He wants you to do. It's just us saying no. And He won't drag you into it.
He submits to you.
Yeah.
That's what love does.
That's a mystery to me.
Love submits.
And so he so many times he would say to me, let me know. I'm ready. When you are, let me know. And I would say no. And that's how fearful I was. That's why fear is such a big deal to me. And so I looked at Donna and I said to her, I'm going to fall. Will you stay with me when I fall? And she said, I've been praying you would fall. And I said to the Lord, okay, all right, do it. I'm tired of this. Do it. And then everything disaster struck, but it was okay in a way because I knew He was the one allowing the disaster. It was like a controlled disaster, but it was really hard. It was hugely embarrassing and all that stuff happening. But I knew, and I would just say that when you're going through rehab for something like that, it's all, the whole source of it's fear. The whole source of the substance abuse is fear. And, depending on how you do the rehab and all, but you're still going to get to the events in your life that are the most horrifying events to you. And you have to confess those, truth tell about them. And so I would this is how funny this is. When I spoke at this men's retreat last week, it was in a really blue collar kind of rough crowd, 1,200 guys. And they were introducing me, Jamie, all these kind of ridiculous accolades. And he's been married 41 years. And I go up there and I carry my sobriety counter with me all the time. And so I walked up there and I just knew this crowd, these 1,200 men. I knew like probably 40% of these guys are in rehab. And all I did, I walked up there and I go, yeah, I've been married 41 years, but let me show you another thing I count. And I just held up my phone with the counter and they went crazy clapping. I go, this is another counter that I'm very proud of. 11 years, and they all cheered. Like that to me is super important to me, is that day. And this 41 years wouldn't be true without this day like that. And they all cheered. And so when you're going through rehab and you have to and I kept telling Donna, okay, I got to tell this one event to you. I got to tell it to you. And I don't want to talk about it. I can't even think about it, but I have to confess to you this event, truth tell about it. And so she's waiting. We have been in, 3 months in sobriety. And
I was terrified.
I know
she was going to say.
And this is the funny thing about fear. And I couldn't even process it in my own brain, what happened, this thing. And so I finally, okay, today's the day I'm going to tell her. And so I get ready, okay, and she sits down. And I tell her the event, and I'm done, and I'm telling her, and she's like, okay, I'm ready. I'm like, no, I did it. I already told you. She goes, that what? You already said it? I'm like, that's it. That's how unimportant it was.
Wow.
She didn't even know I was done.
Wow.
That's how meaningless the lie is that traps you in your whole life. And I noticed that in rehab meetings, whenever people are doing their big reveal of their lie, most people are like, are we out of donuts yet? When you're dumping out the most fearful event of your life, because it's not that important. The things you're most afraid of, God's like, it's common to humanity. Why? It's the lie. It's the enemy just building that thing and building that thing. And the Lord's like, I already paid for all of this stuff. The lie is that you think it's that bad and that you think we're all horrified. We're not. Just say it. That's why sharing your faith is so beautiful. It's like, I'll just end with this. I had a guy come up to me in a church. Imagine this. And he's like, I just can't overcome the shame in my life. I can't overcome the shame in my life. I've tried and I've confessed. And I'm like, okay, look at me in the eyes right now. This is standing in our church after reserve. Look at me in the eyes right now. He goes, okay, tell me what you did. I can't even say it. Tell me what you did. I'm not going to let you go until you tell me exactly what you did that you're so ashamed of. I can't even say it. And he goes, well, and he tells me what I did. And I go, I could care less. I could care less what you did. And he goes, oh, and I go, and I'm not even God. And he loves you and he's forgiven you. And I don't care. So why don't you just put this lie away? I just walked away. It's like it's forgiven. So Donna helped me walk through that. But that's where I learned to trust God. And once I knew when I fell that he caught me at the bottom, I was like, I'll never be afraid of. And we
went to Paris and went to the top of the Eiffel Tower.
I go to the top of every high building in every city I'm in.
Where he never would do it before.
I love walking right into the alcohol section of every store and just standing in front of the bottles going, that's me flipping the bird at the enemy. That's how I do it.
Dude. How amazing.
But it's because it's my great partner here. That's why I wouldn't have, you look at your spouse and go, I'm going to get pushed off a cliff by God. Will you stay with me while I fall? And she's like, I've been praying that you would fall.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then it was like we were 19 again. We kept laughing, going, we're 19 again. Here we go again. We're just going to do the whole thing again.
Except we were 40.
Except we were 40.
Oh my gosh.
Or 50. Were we 40 or 50?
So I said to her the other day, I said,
we were 50.
I said, wouldn't it be fun if we just lost everything and we got to start again? Wouldn't it be amazing?
What
Number
did you
7
say?
right there.
Oh my gosh.
And she said, yo.
No and yes. Amazing. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been
I
a
can't wait
pleasure.
for the next book. Can't wait for your book. Oh, I'm just going to keep talking about it. Till it's done. Anything else you want to
Speak
hit?
it into existence.
That's right. Well, you guys are amazing. We look up to you a lot. So thank you.
Thanks for having us.
you.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, guys, we love you. We'll see you next week.